The wedding ring caught the morning light as Lucas Reed's trembling hands gripped the steering wheel, his son's labored breathing filling the silence between them. He'd been wearing that gold band for 3 years past the funeral, a shield, a lie, a promise he couldn't keep. When Officer Madison Cole's flashlight beam cut through the rain-streaked window, neither of them knew this traffic stop would shatter everything they thought they knew about moving forward. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't letting go of the past. It's admitting you're terrified of the future. If you're ready for a story about second chances, single parenthood, and the courage to love again, stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Lucas and Madison's story travels. The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday morning, the kind of relentless downpour that turned quiet American streets into rivers and made everything feel like the world was crying. Lucas Reed's windshield wipers beat a frantic rhythm, thump, 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 barely keeping pace with the deluge as he navigated the slick roads of Riverside, the small town he'd called home for the past 8 years. "Dad, my stomach really hurts." Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror at his 7-year-old son, Ben, strapped into the back seat with his arms wrapped around his middle. The kid's face was pale, almost gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made Lucas's chest tighten with familiar worry. "I know, buddy. We're almost there. Dr. Patterson's going to figure out what's going on, okay?" Ben nodded weakly, then turned to stare out the rain-streaked window. Lucas's jaw clenched as he pressed slightly harder on the accelerator. This was the 3rd time in 2 weeks that Ben had woken up with severe stomach pain. The first time, Lucas had chalked it up to something Ben ate. The second time, concern had started creeping in. This morning, when Ben couldn't even keep down toast, Lucas had called Dr. Patterson's office the moment they opened and managed to snag a cancellation appointment. The digital clock on the dashboard read 8:47 a.m. The appointment was at 9:00, and the clinic was still 15 minutes away in good weather. Lucas was going to be late. Again. His mind raced through the morning's chaos, the frantic wake-up call when Ben had stumbled into his room at 6, the emergency laundry when Ben had gotten sick on his school uniform, the rushed breakfast that Ben couldn't eat, the desperate phone calls to his boss explaining why he'd be late to the warehouse. Again. Lucas Reed was 34 years old, but some mornings he felt ancient. Exhaustion lived in his bones now, the kind that came from 3 years of solo parenting, of being the only person responsible for keeping another human alive and whole, of being both mother and father to a boy who still sometimes cried for the parent who'd never come home. The wedding ring on his left hand caught the gray morning light filtering through the clouds. Lucas didn't look at it. He never looked at it anymore, but he always felt it there. A weight that had become so familiar he'd forgotten what his hand felt like without it. He was doing 47 in a 35 zone when he saw the lights. "Damn it," Lucas muttered under his breath, then immediately felt guilty. He was trying not to curse in front of Ben, but stress had a way of stripping away good intentions. "Are we in trouble?" Ben's small voice carried a tremor of fear. "No, buddy. Dad just made a mistake. It's okay." Lucas put on his turn signal and carefully pulled over to the shoulder, his heart sinking. He couldn't afford a speeding ticket. He was already behind on the electric bill from last month, and Ben's medical appointments were piling up costs, even with insurance. Through the rearview mirror, Lucas watched as a police cruiser pulled up behind him, lights flashing blue and red against the gray morning. A figure emerged from the driver's side, and Lucas caught a glimpse of a dark uniform and a standard-issue rain jacket before the officer disappeared from view, approaching from the side. Lucas rolled down his window, letting in a gust of cold rain. He had his license and registration ready. He knew the drill. Be respectful, be honest, hope for the best. The officer who appeared at his window was not what he expected. Officer Madison Cole stood 5'7" in her regulation boots, with her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun that rain couldn't dishonor. Her face was calm, professional, the kind of expression that came from years of traffic stops and domestic calls and everything in between. But her eyes, hazel, sharp, attentive, those eyes saw everything. "License and registration, please," she said, her voice carrying the neutral politeness of someone who'd said these words 10,000 times. "Yes, ma'am. Officer, I know I was speeding and I apologize. My son has a medical appointment and—" Lucas handed over the documents, hating how the excuse sounded even though it was true. Madison took the license and registration, but her gaze had already shifted to the back seat. Lucas saw her expression change, just slightly, the professional mask softening around the edges as she took in Ben's pale face and hunched posture. "How are you doing back there, son?" Madison asked, her voice gentler. Ben looked up, startled to be addressed directly. "My stomach hurts," he said quietly. "We're going to the doctor." Madison's eyes flicked back to Lucas, reassessing. She'd seen enough of life to know the difference between an excuse and the truth. The man in front of her had exhaustion carved into every line of his face. There was no wedding ring on the passenger side dashboard, no indication of a partner who might share this burden. And the kid in the back really did look sick. But it was the wedding ring on Lucas Reed's left hand that caught her attention. The gold band was worn, well-loved, the kind that spoke of years of marriage. A family man. Committed. Taken. Madison glanced down at the license. Lucas James Reed, 2247 Oakmont Drive, 34 years old. The photo showed a younger version of the exhausted man in front of her, same strong jawline, same dark hair, but the eyes in the photo still had light in them. "Mr. Reed, you were doing 47 in a 35 zone. That's 12 miles over the speed limit," Madison said, falling back into professional mode. "I'm going to run your information. Sit tight." She walked back to her cruiser, and Lucas let his head fall back against the headrest, closing his eyes for just a moment. The rain drummed against the roof of the car like an accusation. "Dad, are you going to jail?" Ben's voice was small, frightened. Lucas's eyes snapped open. He twisted in his seat to look at his son. "No, buddy, absolutely not. The officer is just doing her job. Worst case, Dad gets a ticket and has to pay a fine. But I'm not going anywhere except to get you to Dr. Patterson, okay?" Ben nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Lucas reached back and squeezed his son's knee gently. "I promise, Ben. I'm not leaving you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that had nothing to do with traffic stops. In her cruiser, Madison Cole ran Lucas Reed's license through the system, watching information populate her screen. Clean driving record. No tickets, no violations, not even a parking citation. Vehicle registration current and valid. No warrants, no red flags. She should write him a ticket. 12 over was 12 over, and speeding through residential zones was dangerous, sick kid or not. But Madison found herself hesitating, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She glanced up at the car in front of her, at the silhouette of a father trying to hold it together for his son. She thought about the wedding ring, about the absence of a partner, about the kind of morning that led to speeding through rain to get to a doctor's appointment. Madison Cole was 31 years old, and she'd been a police officer for 9 years. She'd seen enough of human nature to know that most people were just trying their best with what they had. She'd also seen enough to know that sometimes a little grace went further than enforcement. But there was something else, something that had nothing to do with professional judgment. When she'd looked at Lucas Reed, really looked at him, she'd felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't just sympathy for a struggling parent. It was recognition. He had kind eyes, even exhausted, strong hands, even trembling, and that wedding ring. The thought came unbidden, inappropriate, completely out of line. "If you weren't married, I'd add my number to this warning." Madison actually laughed at herself. A short, sharp sound in the quiet of her cruiser. Where the hell had that come from? She was a professional law enforcement officer, not some teenager developing crushes on traffic violations. She blamed it on the rain, on the gray morning, on the fact that her own dating life had been non-existent for the past year. Still, the thought wouldn't leave. There was something about Lucas Reed that felt safe, genuine, like someone who understood what it meant to be responsible for something bigger than yourself. Madison made a decision. She grabbed her citation book, not to write a ticket, but to make it look official, and stepped back out into the rain. Lucas watched her approach in his side mirror, his stomach tight with anxiety. He was calculating in his head. Speeding ticket in Riverside usually ran about $150, plus the court fee, plus the potential insurance increase. "Mr. Reed," Madison said, leaning down to his window. Rain dripped from the brim of her cap. "Your record is clean? That tells me this isn't a habit for you." "No, ma'am, I don't speed, not usually. I'm just—" Lucas gestured helplessly toward Ben. "I understand. Madison met his eyes, and for a moment, the professional distance dissolved into something more human. I'm going to give you a warning this time, but I need you to understand that speeding through neighborhoods puts other families at risk, even when you're trying to help your own. I understand. Thank you, officer. I really appreciate. However, Madison continued, and something in her voice made Lucas pause. She glanced down at the warning form in her hand, then back up at him. Her next words came out before she could stop them, half joking but entirely sincere. If you weren't married, I'd add my number to this warning. The silence that followed was profound. Lucas stared at her, his brain struggling to process what he'd just heard. The rain seemed to fade away. The world narrowed to this moment, to this woman's hazel eyes looking at him with something between embarrassment and honesty. Madison felt her face flush. What was she doing? This was completely inappropriate. She was on duty. He was clearly married. This was... I'm not, Lucas said quietly. What? Madison's professional composure cracked completely. Married. I'm not... married. Lucas's hand went to the ring on his finger, touching it like a talisman. I'm a widower. 3 years now. The weight of those words settled between them like a stone dropping into still water. Madison felt something in her chest constrict. Not pity, but understanding. That ring wasn't a symbol of current commitment. It was a memorial, a shield, a way of keeping the world at a distance while he figured out how to keep breathing. I'm so sorry, Madison said, and she meant it. I shouldn't have. That was completely out of line. No, it's... Lucas didn't know how to finish that sentence. It wasn't okay. It wasn't not okay. It was complicated. It was the first time in 3 years that someone had looked at him as something other than Ben's dad, or that poor widower, or the guy who lost his wife. In the back seat, Ben watched this exchange with the sharp attention of a child who understood more than adults gave him credit for. The police officer lady was pretty. His dad looked different, not scared or tired, but something else. Something Ben hadn't seen since before. Madison cleared her throat, pulling herself back to professional ground. Here's your warning, Mr. Reed. Please slow down, even when you're in a hurry. I hope your son feels better soon. She handed him the yellow warning slip through the window. Her fingers brushed his for just a moment. Accident or intention, neither could have said. Thank you, officer. Lucas glanced at her name tag. Cole. I appreciate the break, and I'll watch my speed. Madison nodded and stepped back from the car. She should walk away. She should let him drive to his appointment and never think about this traffic stop again. But instead she found herself adding, the pediatric clinic on 5th Street, right? Dr. Patterson? Lucas looked surprised. Yeah, how did you, small town. My partner's kids go there. Dr. Patterson's good people. Madison offered a small smile. Tell her Officer Cole says hello. I will. There was another beat of silence, weighted with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Madison tapped the roof of Lucas's car gently. Drive safe, Mr. Reed. Lucas, he said. You can call me Lucas. Drive safe, Lucas. Madison walked back to her cruiser, feeling his eyes on her until she climbed inside. She sat there for a moment, watching as Lucas's car pulled carefully back onto the road, his turn signal blinking, his speed a careful 32 miles per hour. What had she just done? Madison Cole had been a police officer for 9 years. She'd maintained professional boundaries through countless interactions. She'd never, not once, crossed the line of appropriate conduct with someone she'd pulled over. But something about Lucas Reed had slipped past her defenses before she'd even known they needed defending. She thought about that wedding ring, still on his finger 3 years later. She thought about the exhaustion in his face and the love in his eyes when he'd looked at his sick son. She thought about the way he'd said, I'm not leaving you, with the weight of someone who'd already experienced abandonment, even if not by choice. Madison put her cruiser in drive and pulled back onto her patrol route, but her mind wasn't on traffic violations anymore. In Lucas's car, Ben waited until they'd driven 2 full blocks before speaking. Dad? Yeah, buddy? That police lady was nice. She was, Lucas agreed, his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes on the road, his heart beating a rhythm it had forgotten. She was pretty, too. Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror. Ben was watching him with those two knowing eyes. That's not really appropriate to notice right now, Ben. We need to focus on getting you to the doctor. But she was, Ben insisted, and she smiled at you, a real smile, not a sad smile like the people at church. Lucas didn't have a response to that, because Ben was right. Madison Cole hadn't looked at him with pity or careful sympathy. She'd looked at him like he was just a person, like he was a man, not a tragedy. They made it to Dr. Patterson's office at 9:14. Lucas signed in, apologizing for being late, and settled into the uncomfortable waiting room chairs with Ben leaning against his side. The TV in the corner played morning news at low volume. A mother with two toddlers sat across from them, managing chaos with practiced patience. An elderly man filled out paperwork with shaking hands. Normal people living normal lives. Lucas sometimes felt like he was watching the world through glass, part of it, but separate from it, going through motions but not fully present. Mr. Reed? Ben? A nurse appeared in the doorway with a clipboard and a kind smile. We're ready for you. The appointment took 45 minutes. Dr. Patterson, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and gentle hands, examined Ben thoroughly, asked questions, ran through possibilities. She wanted to schedule some tests just to rule things out. Probably nothing serious, but better safe than sorry. Kids and stomach issues could be tricky. Lucas listened, took notes, scheduled the follow-up tests, and tried not to let anxiety spiral into panic. Ben was fine. Ben had to be fine. Lucas couldn't lose anyone else. By the time they left the clinic, the rain had softened to a drizzle, and Ben was already looking a little better. Dr. Patterson had given him something for the nausea and told him to stick to bland foods for the rest of the day. Can we get ice cream? Ben asked as Lucas buckled him into the car seat. The doctor literally just said bland foods, buddy. Ice cream is bland. It's just milk and cold. Lucas couldn't help but smile. That's not what bland means, and you know it. How about we grab some crackers and ginger ale, and if you feel better this afternoon, maybe we can talk about ice cream tomorrow. Fine, Ben sighed dramatically, as if this were the greatest injustice ever imposed upon a 7-year-old. Lucas's phone buzzed as he climbed into the driver's seat. A text from his boss. Everything okay? Need you here when you can make it. Shipment came in early. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. He'd already used 2 sick days this month for Ben-related emergencies. His boss, Mark, was understanding to a point, but Lucas could feel that patience wearing thin. Single parent or not, the warehouse still needed bodies to move inventory. On my way. Be there in 30. Lucas texted back. Do you have to work? Ben asked, reading his father's expression perfectly. Yeah, buddy. I need to drop you at Mrs. Chen's house for a few hours. Is that okay? Mrs. Chen was their elderly neighbor who'd become Lucas's emergency childcare solution. She was retired, patient, and loved having Ben around, even if he suspected she charged him about half what she should for babysitting. Ben nodded, but his face fell slightly. Lucas knew what he was thinking. Another day of being shuffled around. Another reminder that they didn't have the kind of family structure where someone was always available. Hey, Lucas said gently, turning to look at his son. I know this isn't ideal. I know you probably wanted to rest at home, but I need to work so we can pay for things like doctor visits and your new shoes you've been asking for. I know, Dad. It's okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really. Lucas knew it, and Ben knew it, but they'd both gotten good at pretending. The rest of the day passed in the blur that had become Lucas's normal. Drop Ben at Mrs. Chen's, drive to the warehouse on the industrial side of town, spend 6 hours loading and unloading trucks, his back aching, his mind half-focused. Coworkers asking about Ben with that careful sympathy that always made Lucas's jaw tight. The knowing looks from the other guys when he had to leave early to pick up his son. He was competent at his job, good even, but Lucas knew he was seen as unreliable. The single dad who always had an excuse. The guy who couldn't work overtime because of school pickups and doctor appointments, and a child who needed him home for dinner. Once upon a time, Lucas had been an assistant manager at a tech startup. He'd worn button-down shirts and attended meetings and had a career trajectory. But when Sarah died, when the life insurance wasn't quite enough and the grief was too much, he'd needed something simpler, something that didn't require him to be brilliant, just present. something that paid the bills and let him be home for Ben. So here he was, 34 years old, loading boxes in a warehouse and trying not to think about the person he used to be. By the time Lucas picked up Ben from Mrs. Chen's at 5:30, he was exhausted down to his bones. But Ben's color had improved, and he was chattering about the puzzle he'd helped Mrs. Chen complete, and that made everything worthwhile. "What do you want for dinner?" Lucas asked as they walked up the steps to their small two-bedroom house on Oakmont Drive. "Can we have spaghetti?" "We had spaghetti twice last week." "But it's my favorite." Lucas smiled tiredly. "Spaghetti it is." Their evening routine was worn smooth by repetition. Lucas cooking while Ben did homework at the kitchen table. Dinner eaten with the TV on low for background noise. Dishes washed while Ben took his bath. Story time, even though Ben was getting too old for it. Lights out by 8:30. It was only after Ben was asleep, only in those quiet hours when the house settled into silence, that Lucas felt the full weight of his loneliness. He sat on the edge of his bed, the wedding ring heavy on his finger, and thought about Madison Cole. "If you weren't married, I'd add my number." The words had been playing on repeat in his head all day. Lucas turned the ring on his finger, feeling the familiar groove worn into the gold. He'd put it on 7 years ago when he'd married Sarah Mitchell in a small ceremony at the courthouse. Both of them laughing and hopeful and completely unprepared for how hard life could be. They'd had 5 good years. 5 years of inside jokes and Sunday morning pancakes and plans for the future. They talked about having more kids, about buying a bigger house, about all the mundane, beautiful things that made up a shared life. And then Sarah had gone to work on a Tuesday morning and never come home. A drunk driver running a red light. The kind of random tragedy that shattered lives in an instant. Lucas had worn the ring every day since the funeral. At first it was because he couldn't imagine taking it off. Later it was because taking it off felt like betrayal. Eventually, it became armor, a way to signal to the world that he wasn't available, wasn't ready, wasn't capable of being anything other than Ben's father and Sarah's widower. But today, for the first time in 3 years, someone had looked at him and seen possibility instead of grief. Lucas closed his eyes and let himself remember. Madison Cole's hazel eyes, the way her professional mask had slipped for just a moment. The honesty in her voice when she'd spoken without thinking. She'd been embarrassed when she realized he wore a ring. She'd been genuinely sorry about Sarah. But underneath the apology, there had been something else. Interest. Attraction. The recognition of 2 people who'd each been carrying weight alone and suddenly wondered what it might feel like to share it. Lucas pulled the warning slip from his pocket, unfolding it to read the neat handwriting. Warning issued for speeding. Reduce speed in residential zones. Drive safely. Officer M. Cole. No phone number. Of course there wasn't. She'd been joking, being inappropriate, crossing a line she immediately regretted. Lucas would probably never see her again. Riverside was small, but not that small. Their paths had crossed by chance and would likely never cross again. He should throw the warning away. He should forget about hazel eyes and unexpected honesty. He should focus on being Ben's father and Sarah's widower and nothing more. But Lucas found himself folding the warning carefully and tucking it into his nightstand drawer, right next to the photo of Sarah he'd taken on their honeymoon. She was smiling in the picture, windblown and sunburned and radiant. "I don't know what I'm doing," Lucas whispered to the photograph. "I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I should be." The photo didn't answer. It never did. But Lucas imagined, the way he sometimes allowed himself to imagine in the quiet darkness, what Sarah might say if she could. She'd never wanted him to be alone forever. They talked about it once, early in their marriage, in the abstract way young people discuss impossible futures. "If something happens to me, promise you'll find someone else. Promise you won't be alone." He'd promised, never thinking he'd have to keep that promise. 3 years. Was that long enough? Too long? Not nearly long enough? Lucas didn't have answers. But as he finally lay down to sleep, the memory of Madison Cole's voice followed him into dreams. The next 2 weeks passed without incident. Ben's tests came back clear, just a stress-related stomach issue that Dr. Patterson assured them would resolve with time and routine. Lucas worked his shifts, picked up Ben from school, made dinners, helped with homework, and tried not to think about a police officer he'd met in the rain. He mostly succeeded. It was a Saturday afternoon when fate decided to intervene again. Lucas had promised Ben they could finally get that ice cream if he was feeling better, and Ben had taken him at his word. They'd driven to Sweetwater's, a locally owned ice cream shop downtown that made their own flavors and charged prices that made Lucas wince, but Ben's smile made worthwhile. The shop was busy with weekend crowds, families with small children, teenagers on dates, elderly couples sharing Sundays. Lucas and Ben stood in line, Ben's nose pressed against the glass display case as he agonized over flavor choices with the seriousness of a Supreme Court deliberation. "I can't decide between mint chip and cookie dough," Ben announced. "You always get mint chip," Lucas pointed out. "I know, but what if cookie dough is better and I never know because I always get mint chip?" "That's a valid philosophical dilemma, buddy. Maybe we could—" "Lucas?" The voice came from behind him, and Lucas turned around to find Madison Cole standing there with a surprised smile on her face. She was off duty, wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater that made her eyes even more striking. Her dark hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders instead of pulled back in the severe bun he'd seen before. She looked, Lucas thought with startling clarity, absolutely beautiful. "Officer Cole," Lucas said, his brain scrambling to catch up with the coincidence. "Hi. I didn't expect— I'm surprised to—" "Madison," she corrected gently. "I'm off duty, so you can call me Madison, and I'm just as surprised. I usually don't come here on Saturdays, but I was craving their salted caramel and—" She trailed off, suddenly seeming less certain. "Sorry, I'm rambling." "No, you're fine. I'm just—" Lucas gestured helplessly, aware that he was being spectacularly inarticulate. Ben, who had been watching this exchange with bright interest, tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, you're being weird." "Ben," Lucas said in a warning tone. "You are, though. You sound like when you tried to help me with that math problem you didn't understand." Madison laughed, a genuine warm sound that made something in Lucas's chest feel lighter. "You must be Ben. Your dad told me about you when I pulled him over. Are you feeling better?" Ben's eyes went wide. "You're the police lady, from the rain day. Dad said you were nice." "Did he?" Madison glanced at Lucas with amusement dancing in her eyes. "Well, I try to be, especially to people who are just trying to get their kids to the doctor." "I'm all better now," Ben announced proudly. "It was just stress," Dr. Patterson said, "from school and stuff. But Dad makes sure I eat healthy and don't worry about things." Lucas felt his ears go red. "Ben, I don't think Officer Madison needs to hear about all that." "But she asked if I was feeling better," Ben said reasonably. "I'm just answering." Madison crouched down to be at Ben's eye level, and Lucas noticed the natural ease of the gesture. "I'm really glad you're feeling better, Ben, and I hope your dad isn't still stressed about that speeding ticket." "It was just a warning," Ben said knowledgeably. "Dad told me warnings are when you make a mistake, but the police give you another chance." "That's exactly right." Madison stood back up and her eyes met Lucas's with something warm and knowing. "Everybody deserves a second chance." The words hung between them, meaning more than they said. "Next!" the teenager behind the counter called out, and Lucas realized they'd reached the front of the line. "Oh, we're holding you up," Madison said quickly. Do you want to join us?" The words were out of Lucas's mouth before his brain caught up. If you're here for ice cream anyway, and we're here for ice cream, and..." He stopped himself before he could ramble further. "We'd enjoy the company." Madison hesitated, and Lucas could see her weighing the decision. This was crossing another line, moving from chance encounter to something more intentional. She could make an excuse, keep this casual, protect herself from whatever this was becoming. "I'd like that," she said finally. Ben took charge of introductions once they'd gotten their ice cream, mint chip for him, coffee for Lucas, and salted caramel for Madison, and found a table by the window. He informed Madison all about school, his best friend Tyler, his teacher Mrs. Morrison, who was okay but gives too much homework, and his collection of comics that he was very proud of. Lucas watched his son come alive in a way he hadn't seen in months. Ben was usually quieter around adults, especially adults he'd just met. But there was something about Madison that put him at ease. Maybe it was the way she listened, like she actually cared about the answers. Maybe it was how she asked follow-up questions that showed she was paying attention. Maybe it was just that she treated him like a real person, not like a fragile thing to be handled carefully. "And this is my dad's first day off in forever," Ben was saying, gesturing with his spoon in a way that made Lucas nervous about ice cream trajectory. "He works really hard, so I try to be good so he doesn't have to worry." Lucas's throat tightened. "Ben, you don't have to." "But it's true," Ben said matter-of-factly. "You do work really hard, and I know it's harder because it's just us, and you have to do everything Mom used to do, too." The silence that followed was heavy. Madison's eyes softened with understanding, and Lucas felt exposed in a way that made him want to gather Ben up and leave. But Madison didn't offer the usual platitudes. She didn't say she was sorry again or give them that look of careful sympathy. Instead, she said, "My dad works really hard too. Sometimes when it's someone you love, the work doesn't feel quite as heavy, does it? Because you know why you're doing it." Ben nodded seriously. "Exactly." And just like that, the moment passed. They talked about easier things, favorite movies, the upcoming summer, whether chocolate or vanilla was objectively better. Ben and Madison voted chocolate, Lucas defended vanilla. They agreed to disagree. Madison shared a story about a traffic stop where a woman had been speeding because she'd seen a dog running loose and wanted to get ahead to try to help it. Lucas told them about the time he'd accidentally ordered 12 dozen donuts instead of 12 donuts for a warehouse meeting, and they'd been eating donuts for a week. It was easy, natural, the kind of conversation that happened when people genuinely enjoyed each other's company. An hour passed before Lucas noticed. Through the window, the afternoon sun was starting to slant toward evening. Other customers had come and gone. Their ice cream dishes had long been empty. "We should probably get going," Lucas said reluctantly. "It's getting late. And Ben has homework he's been conveniently forgetting about." "I finished my homework on Friday," Ben protested. "All of it?" "Most of it." "So not all of it." Ben sighed the sigh of a martyr. "Fine, not all of it." Madison smiled as she stood up, gathering her things. "It was really nice running into you both. Ben, good luck with that homework." "Thanks, Madison." Ben hopped off his chair, then looked up at his father with an expression of angelic innocence. "Dad, shouldn't you ask for Madison's number so we can hang out again? That's what you're supposed to do when you like someone." Lucas felt his face go nuclear. "Ben!" "What?" "Tyler's dad has a girlfriend, and that's how it happened. Tyler said his dad got her number at the grocery store." We're not..." Lucas looked at Madison helplessly, but Madison was smiling, not offended. She pulled out her phone, opened to a new contact screen, and handed it to Lucas. "You know what? Ben makes a good point. If you'd ever like to grab ice cream again, or coffee, or just talk, I'd like that." Lucas took the phone with hands that weren't quite steady. This was happening. This was real. He typed in his number with deliberate care, double-checking it before handing the phone back. "I'd like that too," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, possibility. The beginning of something neither could quite name yet. As they walked to their cars, Ben slipped his hand into Lucas's and looked up at him with a smile that held more wisdom than any 7-year-old should possess. "She's nice, Dad. Mom would have liked her." Lucas stopped walking. He looked down at his son, this small person who'd survived losing his mother and rebuilt his world around just the two of them. Ben's eyes were clear, honest, free of the burden Lucas had been carrying. "Yeah, buddy," Lucas said softly. "I think she would have." That night, after Ben was asleep, Lucas sat on the edge of his bed and looked at his phone. Madison had texted him an hour ago. "It was really good to see you today. Ben is wonderful. You're doing an amazing job with him." He'd read the message 17 times, crafting and deleting responses in his head. Everything sounded wrong, too eager, too distant, too much, not enough. Finally, he settled on, "Thank you. And thanks for treating him like a kid, not like he's broken. That means more than you know." Her response came quickly. "He's not broken. Neither are you. You're both just figuring out how to keep going. That takes real courage." Lucas stared at those words for a long time. Then, before he could overthink it, he slid the wedding ring off his finger for the first time in 3 years. His hand felt naked, wrong, too light. but also, somehow, free. He set the ring carefully in his nightstand drawer, next to Sarah's photo and the warning slip from that rainy morning that had started everything. He didn't know if he was ready. He didn't know if this would work. He didn't know anything except that Ben had smiled today in a way that felt like sunlight, and Madison had looked at him like he was worth knowing, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. One step at a time, Lucas thought, just like everything else. He closed the drawer and picked up his phone again. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just the two of us? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Lucas's heart hammered. I'd love that. How about Tuesday afternoon? I have a split shift. Tuesday works. There's a cafe on Maple Street, kind of quiet. 2 p.m., perfect. It's a date. Lucas read those 3 words, it's a date, and felt terror and hope in equal measure. He was standing at the edge of something new, something he hadn't allowed himself to want in 3 years. It would be messy. It would be complicated. There would be moments of guilt and fear and wondering if he was betraying Sarah's memory by moving forward. But there would also be coffee on Tuesday afternoons and ice cream shop conversations, and someone who looked at Ben with genuine affection. There would be the possibility of sharing the weight instead of carrying it alone. Lucas looked at the drawer where the ring now rested, feeling the ghost of its weight on his finger. I'm trying, he whispered to Sarah's memory, to the house's silence, to whatever came next. I'm scared, but I'm trying. In the morning, Ben would notice the missing ring. There would be questions, conversations, reassurances. They would navigate this new territory together, the way they'd navigated everything else since loss reshaped their world. But tonight, Lucas Reed allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in 1,000 mornings: anticipation for tomorrow. Tuesday arrived with the kind of bright autumn sunshine that made everything feel possible. Lucas had changed his shirt 3 times before settling on a simple navy Henley that Ben had declared nice, but not like you're trying too hard, Dad. The fact that his 7-year-old son had become his fashion consultant was simultaneously amusing and terrifying. Mrs. Chen had agreed to watch Ben for a few hours with a knowing smile that made Lucas's ears turn red. News traveled fast in their small neighborhood, and apparently Ben had already informed her that Dad has a friend date with the police lady. It's just coffee, Lucas had protested weakly. Of course it is, dear, Mrs. Chen had replied in a tone that suggested she knew better. You young people and your coffee. Now, standing outside the Maple Street Cafe at 1:57 p.m., Lucas felt his anxiety spike. His hand went automatically to his left ring finger, reaching for the familiar weight that was no longer there. The absence still felt strange, like he'd forgotten something important. Ben had noticed immediately that morning, his small face going serious as he'd studied his father's bare hand across the breakfast table. You took off Mom's ring, Ben had said, not quite a question. Lucas had sat down across from his son, meeting his eyes directly. Yeah, buddy, I did. Because of Madison? Partly because of Madison, but also because I think it's time. The ring was a way of holding on to Mom, but she's not in a piece of metal, Ben. She's in here. Lucas had touched his chest. And in you, and in all the memories we have. Taking off the ring doesn't mean I loved her any less. It just means I'm ready to see what comes next. Ben had been quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I think that's okay, Dad. Mom wouldn't want you to be lonely forever. The wisdom in those words, coming from someone who should still believe in tooth fairies and magic, had nearly broken Lucas. He'd pulled Ben into a hug and held on tight, grateful beyond words for this small person who somehow understood. The cafe door opened, pulling Lucas from his memory. Madison stepped out, looking around until her eyes found him. She was in civilian clothes again, dark jeans, a cream sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked nervous, which somehow made Lucas feel better about his own nerves. Hey, she said, walking over with a smile that didn't quite hide her uncertainty. I wasn't sure if you'd be inside or out here. I got here a few minutes early and started overthinking everything, so I thought I'd wait out here and overthink in the fresh air instead, Lucas admitted. Madison laughed, the sound easing some of the tension between them. I've been overthinking since Saturday. I must have rewritten that last text 15 times. The one that said, it's a date? That's the one. I wasn't sure if that was too forward or not forward enough, or it was perfect, Lucas said quietly. Honest. I appreciated that. They stood there for a moment, two people trying to remember how this worked, how to begin something new when they'd each been alone for so long. Then Madison gestured toward the cafe door. Should we go in before we both talk ourselves out of this? Good plan. The Maple Street Cafe was exactly the kind of place Lucas had hoped for. Quiet without being empty, cozy without being cramped. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture that somehow worked, the smell of coffee and fresh-baked goods. A handful of other customers sat scattered around, absorbed in their laptops or quiet conversations. They ordered at the counter black coffee for Lucas, a vanilla latte for Madison, and a slice of lemon pound cake they agreed to split. Then they found a small table in the corner, away from the windows, where they could talk without feeling on display. So, Madison said after they'd settled in, wrapping her hands around her warm cup, I have to admit, I'm a little out of practice at this. The coffee drinking part or the date part? Definitely the date part. The coffee I've got down. She took a sip, then met his eyes over the rim of her cup. I haven't actually been on a real date in over a year. Work has been consuming. I haven't been on a date in 8 years, Lucas said. And the last one was with my wife, so I'm not sure that counts as the same category. 8 years is a long time. 3 of those years were married, 2 were dating before that, and then 3 years of not dating. Lucas traced the rim of his coffee cup with his finger. I didn't think I'd want to. For a long time, I couldn't imagine being with anyone who wasn't Sarah. Madison was quiet, giving him space to continue or change the subject. Lucas appreciated that she didn't rush to fill the silence with platitudes. Ben said something this morning that stuck with me, Lucas continued. He said Sarah wouldn't want me to be lonely forever. And he's right. We'd actually talked about it once, Sarah and I, in that abstract way you do when you're young and think tragedy only happens to other people. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd find someone else, that I wouldn't close myself off. That must have been an incredibly hard promise to make, Madison said softly. It was hypothetical then, just words. I never thought... Lucas stopped, collecting himself. I'm sorry. This is probably not great first date conversation. Let me tell you all about my dead wife. Lucas? Madison reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth. I asked you here because I wanted to know you. That includes your past, your grief, your son, all of it. If talking about Sarah is part of that, I want to hear it. Lucas looked at her, this woman who barely knew him but was offering grace anyway. Thank you. But I also don't want this whole conversation to be about what I've lost. I'd like to know about you too. Who is Madison Cole when she's not pulling over stressed single dads? Madison smiled and pulled her hand back, taking another sip of her latte. Fair enough. Let's see, I'm 31. I've been with the Riverside PD for 9 years, and I became a cop because my dad was a cop. Very original, I know. Your dad's retired now? Something flickered across Madison's face. There and gone so quickly, Lucas almost missed it. He is. He retired about 5 years ago. Health reasons. There was weight behind those words, but Madison moved on before Lucas could ask about it. I have one younger sister, Jenna, who's a teacher in Portland. She's married with 2 kids, and they're disgustingly happy in that way that makes single people feel both warm and slightly bitter. I know that feeling, Lucas said. My buddy Tom from the warehouse just had his 3rd kid. They do this whole family dinner thing every Sunday, and sometimes I'm invited, and it's wonderful and terrible at the same time. Exactly that. You're happy for them, but also hyper-aware that you're the odd one out. The 5th wheel. The spare tire nobody asked for, Madison agreed, then laughed. We're painting a really attractive picture of ourselves here. Hey, at least we're honest about it. They talked for an hour without noticing the time pass. Madison told him about growing up in Riverside, about the time she'd wanted to be a veterinarian until she'd realized that meant dealing with sick animals, and she couldn't handle that. Lucas shared stories about Ben's early years, the chaotic beauty of new parenthood, the way Sarah used to sing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. It was Madison who noticed his coffee cup was empty and their shared pound cake was down to crumbs. I should probably let you get back to Ben. What time does Mrs. Chen expect you? Lucas glanced at his phone and was startled to see it was already 3:45. In 15 minutes, actually. I didn't realize we'd been talking this long. Good conversation makes time disappear, Madison said, gathering her things. That's how you know it's working. They walked out together into the afternoon sunshine. Lucas's car was parked on the street, Madison's around the corner. They stood on the sidewalk, that awkward moment where neither was quite sure how to end this. I had a really good time, Madison said. Better than I expected, honestly. Not that I expected it to be bad, just that I was nervous, and sometimes when you're nervous, things are awkward. But this wasn't awkward. Or maybe it was a little awkward at first, but in a good way, and now I'm rambling again. Lucas smiled. I had a good time too, and I'd like to do it again if you would. I'd like that. Maybe next time we could do something with Ben too, if that's not too fast. I don't want to overstep, but I really enjoyed meeting him. And I'd like that, Lucas interrupted gently. Ben would too. He asked me this morning if the police lady was going to be his friend now. Madison's face softened. I'd be honored to be his friend. They stood there a moment longer, and Lucas felt the pull to kiss her, to make this moment something more. But it was too soon, too fast, and he had a 7-year-old waiting for him. So instead, he reached out and squeezed her hand briefly. I'll text you later. We can figure out a day that works. I'd like that. Lucas walked to his car feeling lighter than he had in years. He could still feel the warmth of Madison's hand in his, could still hear her laugh echoing in his mind. For the first time since Sarah died, the future felt like possibility instead of just survival. Ben was waiting at Mrs. Chen's window when Lucas pulled up, his face pressed against the glass. He burst out the front door before Lucas had even fully parked. How was it? Did you have fun? Is Madison going to be your girlfriend? Can we see her again? Slow down, buddy, Lucas laughed, ruffling Ben's hair. Yes, I had fun. No, Madison is not my girlfriend. We just met. And yes, we're going to see her again. She actually wants to hang out with both of us next time. Really? Ben's face lit up. That's so cool. Can we take her to the aquarium? I've been wanting to go to the aquarium forever. Lucas thought about it. The aquarium was about an hour away, a whole day trip. It felt significant, intentional. But Ben's enthusiasm was infectious, and the idea of spending a day with Madison, watching her interact with his son, felt right. Let me ask her, Lucas said. But yeah, the aquarium could be really fun. That night, after Ben was asleep, Lucas sat on his couch and pulled out his phone. He'd been composing and deleting messages for 20 minutes, trying to find the right words. Finally, he just went with honest. Ben wants to know if you'd like to go to the aquarium with us this Saturday. I know it's a big ask for a second date, but apparently 7-year-olds don't understand the concept of taking things slow. Madison's response came within minutes. The aquarium sounds perfect. Fair warning, though. I get weirdly competitive about identifying fish species. It's embarrassing. Lucas grinned. Challenge accepted. Ben has been studying his ocean life book all week, so you've got competition. Even better. What time should I meet you? They texted back and forth for another hour, sorting out logistics, sharing small details about their days. It felt comfortable, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. When Lucas finally said goodnight and set his phone down, he realized he was smiling. The week passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Lucas found himself thinking about Saturday at random moments, while loading boxes at the warehouse, while making Ben's lunch, during the quiet hours after bedtime. He felt like a teenager again, counting down to something exciting. Ben, for his part, had become Madison's unofficial PR campaign. He told everyone who would listen that they were going to the aquarium with his dad's friend, who was a police officer and really nice and pretty and knew about sharks. You might want to tone down the enthusiasm a little, buddy, Lucas said gently on Friday night. We don't want to make Madison feel pressured. But I'm excited, Ben protested. Is that bad? No, being excited is good. I'm excited too. I just want to make sure we're not moving too fast or expecting too much. Madison is becoming our friend, but friendships take time to build. Ben considered this seriously. Like how I wasn't best friends with Tyler right away? We had to hang out a bunch first? Exactly like that. Okay, I can be patient excited instead of crazy excited. Lucas pulled his son into a hug. You're a good kid, Ben. You know that? I know. You tell me all the time. Saturday morning dawned clear and perfect, the kind of autumn day that felt like a gift. Lucas had barely slept, his mind racing through imagined scenarios of how the day might go. He was up before dawn, making sure the car was clean, packing snacks and water bottles, checking the weather forecast for the third time. Dad, you're being nervous, Ben observed over breakfast, watching his father rearrange the contents of the cooler for the fourth time. I'm not nervous. I'm just prepared. You're nervous. It's okay. Madison likes you already, so you don't have to worry. How do you know she likes me? Because of how she looks at you. Like how Mrs. Chen looks at her garden when the flowers are blooming, happy and proud. Lucas stopped fussing with the cooler and looked at his son. When did you get so smart about people? Ben shrugged. I pay attention. They picked Madison up at her apartment at 9. She came out wearing jeans and a green jacket, her hair in a braid, looking relaxed and genuinely happy to see them. Ben immediately launched into an explanation of all the exhibits he wanted to see, and Madison listened with complete attention, asking questions and making suggestions. The drive to the aquarium was filled with conversation and laughter. Madison fit naturally into the passenger seat, like she'd always been there. She and Ben debated which was cooler, sharks or octopi, while Lucas drove and felt something in his chest expand with every mile. The aquarium was crowded with weekend families, but Lucas barely noticed. He was too focused on the way Madison crouched down to Ben's level to look at the jellyfish tank, the way she explained the difference between a stingray and a manta ray with genuine enthusiasm, the way she caught Lucas's eye over Ben's head and smiled like they were sharing a secret. They spent 4 hours wandering through exhibits, stopping at every tank, reading every placard. Madison proved true to her word about being competitive with fish identification, getting into a good-natured debate with Ben about whether a particular fish was a parrotfish or a surgeonfish. They both turned to Lucas to settle it, and he'd had to admit he had no idea, which made them both laugh. They ate lunch at the aquarium cafe, overpriced sandwiches and fries that Ben declared were pretty good for fish food, and talked about everything and nothing. Madison shared a story about a sea turtle rescue she'd helped with during a beach vacation. Ben told her about his dream of becoming a marine biologist, a career aspiration that was news to Lucas but that he supported immediately. You'd be great at that, Madison said seriously. You know so much already. My mom used to say I'd be good at it too, Ben said, then glanced at his father quickly, like he was checking to see if mentioning Sarah was okay. Lucas gave him a reassuring nod, and Ben relaxed. She was right, Madison said simply. Moms usually are. They were standing in front of the massive ocean tank, watching a school of silver fish move in synchronized patterns, when Madison's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Lucas saw her expression change, the easy happiness replaced by something tighter, more worried. Everything okay? He asked quietly while Ben was distracted by a passing diver in the tank. It's my mom, Madison said, typing out a quick response. Just checking in. Everything's fine. But her tone suggested it wasn't entirely fine. Lucas was about to ask more when Ben tugged on Madison's sleeve, pointing excitedly at a sea turtle gliding past the glass. The moment passed, but Lucas tucked it away, a reminder that Madison had her own complications, her own weight she carried. They stayed until the aquarium was getting ready to close, Ben finally worn out from excitement and walking. He fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home, his head resting against the window, a small smile on his face. Thank you for today, Lucas said quietly, glancing at Madison in the passenger seat. This was really special. Thank you for inviting me, Madison replied. I can't remember the last time I had this much fun. Ben is amazing, Lucas. You've done an incredible job with him. I'm just doing my best. Some days that feels like barely enough. That's all any parent can do, and from where I'm sitting, your best is pretty extraordinary. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable silence filling the space between them. Then Madison spoke again, her voice softer. My mom texted because my dad had a rough morning. He has Alzheimer's, early onset. He was diagnosed 3 years ago, and it's been progressive. Lucas reached over and took her hand without thinking, just held it while keeping his eyes on the road. "I'm so sorry, Madison. That must be incredibly hard." "It is. My mom is his primary caregiver, but I help as much as I can. Some days are good, some days he doesn't remember who I am." Her voice caught slightly. "That's why I was hesitant about today. Not about wanting to be here, but about whether it's fair to you and Ben to get involved with someone who has this much going on." "Everyone has things going on," Lucas said gently. "I have a kid and a dead wife and a job that barely pays the bills and a life that's held together with duct tape and hope. You have a father who's sick and a mother who needs support and a job that requires you to be strong for everyone else. We're both just people trying to do our best with hard situations." Madison was quiet, and when Lucas glanced over, he saw tears on her cheeks. "Pull over," she said quietly. "What? Are you?" "Please, just pull over." Lucas found a parking lot and pulled in, putting the car in park. Before he could ask what was wrong, Madison had unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him fully. "No one has said that to me in so long," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everyone treats my situation like it's this tragic burden I'm heroically bearing, or they avoid it entirely because they don't know what to say, but you just acknowledged it, made it normal, made me feel normal." "You are normal," Lucas said. "You're a woman dealing with an incredibly difficult situation while still showing up for your life. That's not tragic. That's strong." Madison reached over and cupped his face with one hand, her thumb brushing his cheekbone. "I'm really glad I pulled you over that morning." Me too." They sat there, hands intertwined, the car quiet except for Ben's soft breathing in the back seat. Lucas felt the urge again to kiss her, stronger now, but the moment didn't feel quite right, not with Ben sleeping just feet away, not with both of them emotional and raw. "We should get Ben home," Madison said finally, echoing his thoughts. "But Lucas, I'd really like to keep doing this, seeing where this goes. If you want that too." "I want that. I really want that." Madison smiled and squeezed his hand before letting go and settling back in her seat. Lucas put the car in drive and pulled back onto the road, feeling like something significant had shifted between them. They weren't just testing the waters anymore. They were choosing to dive in, complications and all. When they dropped Madison off at her apartment, she leaned back into the car to wave at Ben, who had woken up just as they'd pulled up. "Bye, Madison. Today was the best," Ben called out. "It really was. We should do it again soon." "Can we go to the movies next time? Dad said maybe we could see the new superhero one." Madison looked at Lucas with raised eyebrows. "A movie sounds great. What do you think, Lucas?" "I think that sounds like a plan. I'll text you?" "Please do." Madison started to close the door, then paused. She leaned in quickly and kissed Lucas on the cheek. Just a brief touch of her lips against his skin, there and gone before he could fully process it. "For being wonderful," she said softly, then closed the door and walked toward her building with a wave. Lucas sat there for a moment, his hand touching his cheek where he could still feel the warmth of her kiss. "Dad, you're smiling really big," Ben observed from the back seat. "I know, buddy. Is Madison your girlfriend now?" Lucas pulled away from the curb, still smiling. "I think maybe she's becoming my girlfriend. These things take time." "But you like her a lot." "I do. Is that okay with you?" Ben was quiet for a moment, and when Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror, his son was looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. "I miss Mom," Ben said finally. "But I like Madison too. Can both things be true?" Lucas had to swallow past the lump in his throat. "Yeah, buddy. Both things can absolutely be true. You can miss Mom and still be happy about new people in our life. That's okay. That's healthy, even." "Good. Because I am happy. Today was really fun." "It was, wasn't it?" That night, after Ben was in bed, Lucas sat on his couch and thought about Madison's father, about her mother caring for him, about the weight she carried every day while still showing up with a smile. He thought about her tears in the car, about how much it had meant to her to be seen as normal instead of tragic. He understood that more than she knew. For 3 years, Lucas had been the widower, defined by loss rather than seen as a whole person. Madison had looked at him and seen a man, a father, someone worth knowing beyond his grief. It felt revolutionary. His phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Thank you for today, for all of it, for making me feel like I can have this. Happiness, connection, something normal, even with everything else going on." Lucas replied, "Thank you for trusting me with your dad's situation. I meant what I said. We all have complications. That doesn't make us less worthy of good things. When can I see you again?" Lucas smiled. "How's your schedule this week?" "Ben's been asking about that movie. I have Wednesday afternoon off." "Too soon?" "Perfect." They texted for another hour, making plans, sharing small moments from their day, building something fragile and hopeful word by word. When Lucas finally set his phone down and headed to bed, he paused at Ben's door, watching his son sleep peacefully. "We're going to be okay," Lucas whispered. "Better than okay. We're going to be happy." And for the first time in 3 years, he truly believed it. The next 6 weeks unfolded like a dream Lucas hadn't dared to imagine. Wednesday movies became a regular thing, with Ben wedged happily between Lucas and Madison, sharing popcorn and whispering commentary that made them both laugh. Madison started joining them for dinner on Fridays, bringing homemade lasagna or picking up pizza, fitting naturally into their small kitchen like she'd always belonged there. She taught Ben how to play chess on a rainy Sunday afternoon while Lucas watched from the doorway, his heart full in a way he'd forgotten was possible. Life began to feel less like survival and more like actual living. Lucas caught himself humming while doing dishes, smiling at work for no particular reason, looking forward to tomorrow instead of just enduring today. Ben's laughter came easier, louder, more frequent. The house that had felt so empty for 3 years suddenly felt warm again, alive with possibility. Madison was easy to love. That was both the blessing and the terror of it. She remembered Ben's favorite color and surprised him with a blue notebook for his ocean life drawings. She asked Lucas about his day and actually listened to the answer. She never tried to replace Sarah or pretend the past hadn't happened. Instead, she made space for all of it. The grief, the healing, the complicated mess of moving forward while honoring what came before. But Lucas was also learning that Madison came with her own shadows, her own weight that she carried with practiced grace. She canceled plans sometimes with apologetic texts that said family emergency without elaboration. She occasionally went quiet during conversations, her mind clearly somewhere else, worry etched in the lines around her eyes. And every Sunday, without fail, she disappeared for the entire day. "Where does Madison go on Sundays?" Ben asked one Saturday night as Lucas tucked him in. They'd spent the afternoon at the park with Madison, and she'd left with her usual "I'll see you Monday" that felt both routine and mysterious. "She visits her family," Lucas said, smoothing Ben's blanket. "Remember, her dad isn't feeling well, so she helps take care of him. But she seems sad when she talks about it. Like really sad." Lucas sat on the edge of Ben's bed. "Sometimes taking care of people we love is hard, even when we want to do it. It can make us feel lots of things at once, love and sadness and tiredness all mixed together." Ben nodded slowly. "Like how I felt after Mom died? When I was sad but also worried about you being sad?" The observation landed like a stone in Lucas's chest. "Yeah, buddy, kind of like that." "Do you think Madison needs help? Like how I needed you to help me?" Out of the mouths of babes, Lucas thought. "I don't know, Ben, but that's a kind thing to wonder about." The next Friday, Madison showed up for dinner looking more exhausted than Lucas had ever seen her. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her smile didn't quite reach the usual brightness. She'd brought Chinese takeout instead of her planned homemade chicken parmesan, apologizing 3 times for the change. "Don't apologize," Lucas said, taking the bags from her. "This is perfect. Ben loves Chinese food." "Orange chicken," Ben cheered from the table, already setting out plates. But as they ate, Lucas watched Madison push her food around more than she ate it. She participated in the conversation, asked Ben about his science project, laughed at appropriate moments. But there was a hollowness to it, a performance of normalcy that didn't quite hide the strain underneath. After dinner, Ben settled in the living room with a movie while Lucas and Madison cleaned up the kitchen. The domesticity of it struck Lucas sometimes, how natural it felt to wash dishes while she dried, to move around each other in the small space like a choreographed dance they'd practiced for years instead of weeks. "You okay?" Lucas asked quietly, handing her a wet plate. Madison was quiet for a long moment, drying the plate with meticulous attention. "My dad had a bad week," she said finally. "He's been more confused than usual. Yesterday he got angry with my mom because he didn't recognize her. He thought she was a stranger trying to steal from him." Lucas set down the dish he was washing and turned to face her fully. "Madison, I'm so sorry." She called me in tears. My mom, who never cries, who's been handling this with such strength, she just broke down. Madison set the plate down carefully, her hands trembling slightly. "And I couldn't even get there until my shift ended. I had to tell my mother to hold on, that I'd be there in a few hours, while she dealt with my father accusing her of being a thief in her own home." "That's awful, for all of you." Madison leaned against the counter, crossing her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "The worst part is knowing it's only going to get worse. This is the good period, relatively speaking. It's progressive, degenerative. There's no getting better, only different stages of worse." Lucas moved to stand beside her, close but not touching, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. "What can I do? How can I help?" "You can't. Nobody can. That's the thing about Alzheimer's. It just takes and takes until there's nothing left of the person you knew." Her voice cracked. "My dad was the strongest man I knew. He ran into burning buildings. He talked down armed suspects. He saved lives. And now he can't remember what day it is or who his wife is." "But he's still your dad," Lucas said gently. "The man who raised you, who made you who you are. The disease doesn't erase that." Madison turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "How do you do it? How did you survive losing Sarah and still show up every day for Ben with so much love and patience? How did you not just fall apart?" "Who says I didn't fall apart?" Lucas reached over and took her hand. "I fell apart plenty. There were nights I sat in my car in the driveway and cried until I couldn't breathe. Days I barely got out of bed. Moments I wanted to give up. But Ben needed me, and somehow that was enough to keep me moving. One foot in front of the other, one breath at a time." "I'm so tired, Lucas." The admission came out like a confession. "I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of splitting myself between my job and my parents and trying to have something that feels like my own life. I'm tired of watching my dad disappear piece by piece while my mom pretends she's fine when she's clearly drowning. So stop being strong, at least right now with me. You don't have to hold it together here." Madison let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "If I stop being strong, I'm afraid I'll completely break. Then break. I'll help you put the pieces back together." That did it. Madison turned into Lucas's chest and let herself cry, really cry, in a way she clearly hadn't let herself do in a long time. Lucas wrapped his arms around her and held on, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances that he wasn't going anywhere, that it was okay, that she was allowed to feel all of this. They stood like that for a long time, the kitchen warm around them, the sounds of Ben's movie filtering in from the other room. When Madison finally pulled back, her eyes were red and her face was blotchy, and Lucas thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her face. "This is not how I wanted tonight to go." "I'm supposed to be the together one, the one who has her life in order." "Says who?" Lucas interrupted. "Madison, you show up for everyone else constantly. Your job, your parents, us. When do you get to be the one who needs support?" "I don't know how to be that person. I've always been the helper, not the one who needs help." "Well, lucky for you, I've had a lot of practice needing help. And I've learned that letting people in, letting them see the messy parts, that's not weakness. That's trust. That's intimacy." Madison searched his face, and Lucas saw the moment she made a decision. "My mom has Ben's school project presentation marked on her calendar. It's next Thursday, right?" Lucas felt his stomach drop. In all the chaos of the past few weeks, he'd completely forgotten to tell Madison about Ben's big presentation. Ben had been working on a project about ocean conservation for his class, and parents were invited to attend. Ben had asked Lucas weeks ago if Madison might come too. His face so hopeful, Lucas hadn't had the heart to say it might be too much to ask. "Yeah, it's Thursday at 2. Ben's been working really hard on it. He actually asked if you might want to come, but I told him you'd probably be working." "I'd love to come," Madison said immediately. "I already requested the time off." Your son sent me a very official invitation that he made himself, complete with drawings of sea turtles. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He did? He did, and I told him I wouldn't miss it for the world. Madison's smile was watery but genuine. That's what I mean about you and Ben. You've given me something to look forward to, something that feels like mine, like I'm building something good instead of just watching something fall apart. You are building something good, with us, for yourself, all of it. They finished cleaning the kitchen in comfortable silence, and when they joined Ben in the living room, Madison settled on the couch with Ben immediately snuggling up against her side. Lucas sat in the armchair and watched them, his heart so full it almost hurt. This was what he'd been terrified of wanting again, this sense of family, of rightness, of home. The movie ended and Ben went to bed with only token protest. Madison stayed while Lucas did the bedtime routine, and when he came back downstairs, he found her looking at the photos on his mantel. Most were of Ben at various ages, but there were still a few of Sarah. Lucas had stopped hiding them after Ben asked why all of Mom's pictures were gone. Said it made him sad that she'd disappeared from the house too. She was beautiful, Madison said quietly, touching the frame of Sarah and Lucas's wedding photo. And you look so young here, so happy. I was both those things, Lucas said, coming to stand beside her. 27, newly married, thought we had our whole lives figured out. Does it bother you, me being here in your home, with her pictures still up? No, it feels right, actually, like past and present can coexist without erasing each other. Lucas took Madison's hand. Sarah was my first love, the mother of my child. She shaped who I am. But she's also gone, and I'm still here, and I'm allowed to keep living. I think she'd like you for what it's worth. She'd appreciate how good you are with Ben. Madison squeezed his hand. I hope I get to keep being good with him, with both of you. You will. We're not going anywhere. Madison turned to face him fully, and Lucas saw vulnerability in her expression that she rarely let show. I need to tell you something about why I'm so scared of letting myself have this. Okay? My dad's diagnosis came right after I'd gotten engaged. I was 28, thought I'd found the person I'd spend my life with. But when things got hard with my dad, when I needed support and help, and couldn't be the fun, carefree girlfriend anymore, he left. Told me he didn't sign up to be a caregiver to someone else's parent, said I needed to choose between him and my family. Lucas felt anger flash through him. He was an idiot. Maybe. Or maybe he was honest about what he could handle. Either way, it taught me that people leave when things get hard, that asking for support is a good way to end up alone. Madison, look at me. Lucas waited until her eyes met his. I'm not him. I know what hard looks like. I've lived through the kind of hard that breaks people. And I'm still here, still choosing to show up, still willing to take on complicated because the alternative is being alone. And I'm done with alone. But what if it gets worse? What if my dad's situation deteriorates and I have to be there more and I can't be here as much, and then we'll figure it out together? That's what this is, Madison. We're building something together, which means when one of us is struggling, the other helps carry the weight. That's the whole point. Madison's eyes filled with tears again. I'm not used to people staying. Get used to it, because I'm staying, Ben's staying. We're all in, mess and complications and all. She kissed him then, properly kissed him for the first time. It was soft and tentative and tasted like salt from her tears, and it felt like a promise. When they pulled apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. I should go, Madison whispered. It's late, and you have work tomorrow. Stay, Lucas said, then clarified quickly. Not like that. Just stay a little longer. We can watch something, or just sit or talk. I'm not ready for you to leave yet. So Madison stayed. They settled on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, the TV on, but neither of them really watching. They talked quietly about small things, about Ben's project and Lucas's annoying coworker and the new coffee shop opening downtown. Normal things, easy things, the kind of conversation that stitched two lives together thread by thread. It was nearly midnight when Madison finally left, and Lucas stood in the doorway watching her drive away, feeling the same mix of joy and terror that had become his constant companion. He was falling in love with her. Maybe had already fallen. And love meant vulnerability, meant risking loss, meant opening himself up to the possibility of being shattered all over again. But it also meant possibility. Connection. The chance at a full life instead of just a functional one. As Lucas locked up and headed to bed, he thought about what he'd told Ben all those weeks ago. Both things can be true. He could be scared and hopeful, grieving and healing, honoring the past while reaching for the future. The week that followed felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Madison texted regularly, but the messages were shorter, more distracted. She had to cancel their Wednesday movie, apologizing profusely. Her dad had wandered away from home in the middle of the night, and the police had found him 3 miles away, confused and frightened, trying to find his way to a house they'd sold 15 years ago. Lucas sent her reassurance, offered to help, asked what she needed. But he could feel her pulling away, could sense the walls going back up as her father's condition demanded more of her attention and energy. She still confirmed she'd be at Ben's presentation Thursday, but there was a brittleness to the confirmation that worried Lucas. Thursday arrived cold and gray, threatening rain. Ben was a bundle of nervous energy all morning, rehearsing his presentation over breakfast until Lucas gently told him to save some energy for the actual event. Lucas had managed to get the afternoon off work, promising to make up the hours over the weekend. He picked Ben up from school at 1:30, both of them heading to the classroom where parents were already gathering. Madison wasn't there yet, but it was only 1:45. Lucas found seats in the front row, saving one for Madison, while Ben joined his classmates at the front of the room. The teacher, Mrs. Morrison, welcomed everyone and explained the format. Each student would present their project, then take questions. 1:50, 2 o'clock, 2:10. Ben was fourth in the presentation order, and Madison's seat remained conspicuously empty. Lucas checked his phone for the 10th time, but there were no new messages. The last text from Madison was from that morning. "Can't wait to see Ben's presentation today. See you at 2. Ben presented at 2:20, and he was magnificent. He spoke clearly about ocean pollution, about conservation efforts, about why protecting marine life mattered. He showed drawings he'd made and facts he'd researched, and Lucas's heart swelled with pride. But he also saw the way Ben's eyes kept drifting to the empty seat beside Lucas, the small flicker of disappointment quickly hidden behind professional presentation mode. The event wrapped up at 3. Parents mingled, congratulating kids, taking photos. Ben accepted compliments from other parents with polite thank yous, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "She didn't come," Ben said quietly when they were back in the car. "Something must have happened with her dad," Lucas said, checking his phone again. Still nothing. "I'm sure she wanted to be here." "But she wasn't." Ben stared out the window. "She promised." Lucas didn't know what to say to that. He was feeling his own disappointment, his own worry. Madison had been so certain she'd be there. For her to miss it without even a text, something must be seriously wrong. He tried calling as they drove home. It went straight to voicemail. He sent a text asking if everything was okay, if she needed anything. No response. The silence stretched through the evening, through Ben's quiet dinner and subdued homework session. Lucas kept checking his phone, anxiety building with each passing hour. By the time he put Ben to bed, he was genuinely worried. What if something had happened to her father? What if Madison was in crisis and unreachable? At 10 p.m., his phone finally buzzed. Lucas grabbed it so fast he nearly dropped it. Madison's text was short, clinical. "I'm so sorry I missed the presentation. Family emergency. I can't do this right now. I need space." Lucas stared at the message, reading it 3 times, trying to parse meaning from 16 words. Family emergency made sense, but I can't do this right now? I need space? He called immediately. Voicemail. He texted back. "Madison, what's going on? Are you okay? Is your dad okay? Please talk to me." No response. Lucas sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, and felt the floor drop out from under him. This was it. This was the moment he'd been terrified of since that first coffee date. The moment when things got too hard, too complicated, too real. The moment when Madison realized that taking on a relationship with a widowed single father while managing her own family crisis was more than she could handle. He should have known better, should have protected himself, should have kept the walls up instead of tearing them down. But even as the thoughts spiraled, another part of Lucas's brain pushed back. This wasn't Sarah's death. This was a rough patch. People had rough patches. Madison was clearly in crisis with her father, clearly overwhelmed. Maybe she just needed time to sort through it. Maybe space didn't mean goodbye. Lucas sent one more text. I understand you're going through a lot. Take the space you need, but please know that Ben and I are here when you're ready. We're not going anywhere. He forced himself to put the phone down and not check it every 30 seconds. He brushed his teeth, changed into sleep clothes, went through the motions of bedtime routine while his mind raced. In the morning, he'd have to explain to Ben why Madison hadn't shown up, why she wasn't responding, why sometimes adults made promises they couldn't keep even when they meant well. Sleep didn't come easily. Lucas lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, remembering Madison's tears in his kitchen. I'm afraid I'll completely break, she'd said. Maybe she'd reached that breaking point. Maybe asking for space was her way of preventing the complete collapse she'd been fighting against. Or maybe she was doing what her ex-fiancé had done, realizing that Lucas came with complications she didn't want to deal with. Maybe the reality of blending families and managing crises and trying to build something new while carrying old wounds was too much. Lucas rolled over and saw Sarah's photo in his nightstand, visible through the open drawer. He'd stopped keeping it out when Ben had asked why he looked sad every time he saw it, but he couldn't bring himself to pack it away completely. I tried, he whispered to the photo. I really tried. But maybe I'm not ready. Maybe we're not ready. The photo, as always, offered no answers. Lucas closed the drawer and pulled the covers up, willing sleep to come and quiet his racing mind. Tomorrow would bring clarity, or more confusion, or heartbreak. But tomorrow would also bring Ben, who would need breakfast and reassurance and help getting ready for school. Tomorrow would bring work and responsibilities and all the daily tasks that kept Lucas moving forward. He'd survived loss before. He could survive it again. Even if surviving was all he could manage. Morning came gray and cold, matching Lucas's mood perfectly. He'd barely slept, checking his phone compulsively through the night, only to find the same silence that had started at 10 p.m. No explanation, no follow-up, just those 16 words hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. Ben was quiet over breakfast, pushing his cereal around the bowl without eating. Lucas knew his son well enough to recognize when something was brewing behind those thoughtful eyes. You can ask me about it, Lucas said gently, pouring himself a second cup of coffee he didn't really want but needed anyway. Is Madison breaking up with you? Ben's voice was small, careful, like he was afraid the question itself might shatter something. Lucas set down his mug and came to sit across from Ben at the kitchen table. I don't know, buddy. She's dealing with some really hard stuff with her dad right now, and sometimes when adults are overwhelmed, they need space to figure things out. But she promised she'd come to my presentation. She made a calendar reminder and everything. She showed me. The hurt in Ben's voice cut deeper than Lucas's own disappointment. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Ben getting attached, getting hopeful, and then experiencing another loss. Lucas had thought he was being careful, taking things slow, but clearly not slow enough to protect his son from this. I know she promised, Ben, and I know she meant it. But sometimes life gets complicated and people can't always do what they planned, even when they really want to. That's what you said about Mom. Ben's eyes were filling with tears. That she didn't mean to leave us, that sometimes bad things just happen. But Madison chose to not come. That's different. Lucas felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Ben, Madison didn't choose to hurt you. She's going through something really difficult with her family, but we're supposed to be her family too, right? Isn't that what you said? That we were building something together? Ben's voice cracked. Or were you lying? I wasn't lying. I believed that. I still want to believe it. But she left anyway. Ben pushed away from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Everyone leaves eventually. Mom didn't want to, but Madison chose to. At least with Mom, it wasn't our fault. Ben, wait! But his son was already running upstairs, and moments later Lucas heard the bedroom door slam. He sat at the kitchen table, his cold coffee in front of him, and felt the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. He should have been more careful, should have protected Ben better, should have known that opening their lives to someone new was just inviting more pain. Madison had been right to ask for space. This was too much, too complicated, too many people who could get hurt. Lucas's phone buzzed on the table. For a split second, hope flared that it might be Madison, with an explanation, an apology, something. But it was just a reminder about a dentist appointment for Ben next week. Another responsibility on the endless list of things single fathers had to manage alone. He gave Ben a few minutes, then went upstairs and knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Buddy, I need to take you to school." "I don't want to go." "I know, but we don't get to skip our responsibilities just because we're sad or hurt. That's part of being a Reed, remember? We show up even when it's hard." There was a long silence. Then the door opened. Ben's eyes were red, but he'd clearly been trying to pull himself together. "Can I stay home from school and go to work with you instead? Please? I don't want to be around other kids today." Lucas thought about his shift at the warehouse, the heavy lifting and the noise, and the complete inappropriateness of bringing a 7-year-old to that environment. Then he thought about Ben's face, about the way his son was trying so hard to be brave when he was clearly breaking inside. "Let me make a phone call," Lucas said. 10 minutes later, he'd called in sick to work, adding to the growing list of absences that were probably putting his job in jeopardy, and texted Mrs. Chen to let her know Ben wouldn't need pickup today. Then he sat down on Ben's bed and pulled his son close. "How about we take a mental health day, just you and me? We can do whatever you want." Ben sniffled against Lucas's shoulder. "Can we go to the beach, even though it's cold?" The beach was an hour and a half away, and the weather forecast called for clouds and wind. It would be miserable. Perfect, in other words. "Yeah, buddy, we can go to the beach." They drove in comfortable silence, the landscape gradually changing from suburban sprawl to coastal scrub. Ben stared out the window, occasionally wiping at his eyes, while Lucas focused on the road and tried not to check his phone at every red light. Still nothing from Madison. The silence was starting to feel less like "I need space" and more like "I'm gone." The beach was nearly deserted when they arrived, just a few hardy joggers and a woman walking her dog. The wind whipped off the ocean in fierce gusts, and the sky hung low and gray. Lucas and Ben walked along the shoreline, neither speaking, just being present with their grief. "I really liked her, Dad," Ben said finally, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I thought maybe we could be a family again. A different family, but still a family." "I know. I liked her too. I more than liked her." Lucas picked up a piece of driftwood and threw it into the waves. "I was falling in love with her, if I'm being honest." "Oh, were you going to marry her?" "I don't know. Maybe eventually. We hadn't talked about it, but yeah, I could see that future. I could see her being part of our lives permanently." Ben was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had probably been on his mind since last night. "Did I do something wrong? Did I make her leave?" Lucas stopped walking and crouched down to Ben's eye level, putting his hands on his son's shoulders. "Ben, look at me. None of this is your fault, not even a little bit. Madison is dealing with some really hard stuff with her sick dad, and sometimes when people are overwhelmed, they make choices that hurt other people even though they don't mean to. But she promised. I know. And breaking promises hurts, especially from people we care about. But that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You were wonderful. You are wonderful. Madison's struggles are about her, not about you. Then why does it feel like my fault?" Lucas pulled Ben into a tight hug, feeling his son's small body shake with sobs. "Because that's what our brains do when people leave. They try to find a reason, try to figure out what we could have done differently. But sometimes there's no good reason. Sometimes life is just hard and people make choices we don't understand." They sat down on a piece of driftwood side by side, watching the waves crash against the shore. The ocean was relentless, powerful, indifferent to human heartbreak. There was something comforting about that, a reminder that the world kept turning even when everything felt broken. "Mom wouldn't have left on purpose," Ben said after a while. "If she could have stayed, she would have. You're absolutely right. Madison could stay. She's choosing not to." Lucas didn't have an answer to that, because Ben was right. Madison was alive, was capable of making choices, and right now she was choosing distance over connection. Maybe she had good reasons. Maybe she was protecting herself or them or everyone involved, but the result was the same. Ben was hurting, and Lucas couldn't fix it. "I'm sorry, buddy," Lucas said quietly. "I'm sorry I let someone into our lives who ended up hurting you. I thought I was being careful, thought I was doing the right thing, but clearly I messed up." "You didn't mess up, Dad. You were happy." "I was happy too." Ben leaned against Lucas's side. "It's not your fault that happy doesn't always last." The wisdom in those words, from a 7-year-old who'd already learned more about loss than most adults, made Lucas's throat tight. They sat there for a long time, father and son, processing grief in the way they'd learned to do over the past 3 years. Together, honestly, without trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. By the time they drove home, both of them were windburned and exhausted, but somehow lighter. They'd talked about Sarah, about Madison, about how love was always a risk but still worth taking. They'd agreed that even though it hurt right now, they didn't regret letting Madison into their lives. The good moments had been real, even if the ending was painful. "Next time, if there's a next time, we'll be even more careful," Lucas promised as they pulled into their driveway. "We'll take things slower, make sure someone really wants to be part of our family before we let them all the way in. Or maybe we'll find someone who stays no matter what," Ben suggested. "Like how you stayed for me even when things were really hard after Mom died." "Yeah, buddy, maybe we'll find that." Inside, Lucas made grilled cheese sandwiches while Ben set up a blanket fort in the living room. They ate dinner inside the fort, watching movies on Lucas's laptop, pretending they were camping. It was the kind of father-son bonding that Lucas had gotten good at over the years, turning pain into connection, finding light in dark moments. But after Ben was asleep, after the fort was dismantled and the dishes were washed, Lucas sat alone in the quiet house and let himself feel the full weight of his disappointment. He'd really thought Madison was different, thought she understood what it meant to choose people even when things got hard. She'd said all the right things about staying, about being all in, about building something together. But when push came to shove, when her father's situation got worse and the complications piled up, she'd chosen the easier path. She'd pulled away instead of asking for help. She'd broken promises to Ben without explanation. She'd gone silent instead of communicating. Lucas looked at his phone one more time. Still nothing. It had been over 24 hours since her last message. Whatever was happening with her father, surely she could spare 30 seconds to send an update, to explain, to acknowledge that she'd hurt them. Unless she simply didn't care enough to try. That thought hurt worse than anything else. The idea that what had felt so significant to Lucas and Ben had been just another complication to Madison, something she could walk away from without looking back. Lucas opened his text thread with Madison, reading back through weeks of messages. Good morning texts and good night wishes. Photos of Ben's latest drawings. Inside jokes and plans for the future. It had all felt so real, so solid, so right. He started typing several times, deleting each attempt. What was there to say? He'd already told her they were there when she was ready. He couldn't make her want to be part of their lives. He couldn't force her to choose them. Finally, Lucas put the phone down without sending anything. If Madison wanted space, he'd give her space. He wouldn't beg or plead or demand explanations. He had too much pride for that, and more importantly, he had Ben to think about. Ben didn't need to see his father falling apart over someone who'd walked away. The weekend passed in a fog. Lucas worked a double shift on Saturday to make up for his Friday absence, came home exhausted, and spent Sunday doing laundry and meal prep and all the mundane tasks that kept their life running. He didn't hear from Madison. He told himself he didn't care. Monday morning brought a call from Ben's school. Mrs. Morrison wanted to schedule a parent-teacher conference. Ben's grades were fine, she assured Lucas, but she'd noticed some behavioral changes and wanted to check in. Lucas scheduled it for Thursday afternoon, the same time slot where he should have been celebrating Ben's presentation with Madison. Work was a nightmare. His boss pulled him aside to discuss concerns about reliability, which was corporate speak for "you're on thin ice." Lucas apologized, promised to do better, and swallowed his frustration about being penalized for having a sick kid and a life outside the warehouse. He needed this job. He couldn't afford to lose it, not with Ben's medical bills and their tight budget. Tuesday afternoon, Lucas picked Ben up from school to find his son unusually quiet. They were halfway home before Ben spoke. Tyler asked me today if Madison was my new mom. Lucas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What did you say? I said no. I said she was Dad's friend, but we don't see her anymore. Ben paused. Tyler said his dad's girlfriend left too. He said sometimes grown-ups are stupid about love. Lucas almost laughed despite himself. Tyler might have a point there. Are you stupid about love, Dad? Probably. I think most people are, at least sometimes. Love makes us hopeful and vulnerable, and that combination can lead to some stupid choices. Was it stupid to let Madison into our family? Lucas thought about that carefully. No, it wasn't stupid. It was brave. Opening yourself up to caring about someone new after you've lost someone, that takes real courage. Sometimes courage doesn't work out the way we hoped, but that doesn't make it stupid. I wish she'd at least said goodbye properly, Ben said quietly. I would have understood if she'd explained, I'm not a baby. You're right. You deserve better than silence. We both did. Lucas pulled into their driveway and turned to look at Ben. But sometimes people are dealing with so much that they can't handle goodbyes properly. It doesn't make it okay, but it makes it human. That night, after Ben was asleep, Lucas found himself doing something he'd promised himself he wouldn't do. He drove to Madison's apartment building. Her car was in the parking lot, lights on in her second-floor window. She was home. She was fine. She just wasn't responding. Lucas sat in his car across the street, staring up at that lit window, feeling pathetic and angry in equal measure. He should go up there. Demand an explanation. Ask her what the hell had happened between I'm all in and complete radio silence. But what would that accomplish? If Madison wanted to talk to him, she would. Showing up at her door would just make him look desperate, would put her on the defensive, would probably make everything worse. Lucas was about to start his car and leave when the apartment door opened. Madison came out, and even from a distance, Lucas could see how different she looked. Her hair was pulled back messily, she was wearing sweatpants and an oversized jacket, and her shoulders were hunched in a way that spoke of carrying weight too heavy to bear. She walked to her car, got in, and drove away without looking in Lucas's direction. He watched her taillights disappear around the corner, then sat there in the dark, feeling like the world's biggest fool. He'd driven here hoping for what? A glimpse of her? Some sign that she was thinking about them too? Lucas drove home angry. At himself, at Madison, at the whole situation. He'd survived losing Sarah. He'd rebuilt a life for himself and Ben. They'd been doing fine before Madison came along. They didn't need her. They'd be fine without her. But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Lucas had to admit the truth. They would be fine without Madison, but they'd been more than fine with her. They'd been happy in a way Lucas had forgotten was possible. And Ben had laughed more in the past 6 weeks than he had in the previous 6 months. That was worth something, worth mourning, at least. Wednesday brought unexpected news. Lucas's phone rang during his lunch break, an unknown number that he almost didn't answer. Mr. Reed, this is Eleanor Cole, Madison's mother. Lucas nearly dropped his phone. Mrs. Cole, is everything okay? Is Madison is fine, physically, anyway. Eleanor's voice was tired, strained. I'm calling because I wanted to explain what's been happening. Madison doesn't know I'm calling, and she'd probably be furious if she knew, but I can't watch her do this to herself anymore. Do what? Sacrifice her own happiness because she thinks she has to carry everything alone. Eleanor sighed. My husband had a severe episode last Thursday morning. He became violent, confused. We had to call for an ambulance. Madison was supposed to come to Ben's presentation, but I called her in a panic and she rushed to the hospital instead. Lucas felt his anger deflate, replaced by concern. Is your husband okay now? He's stabilized, but we had to make the decision to move him to a memory care facility. It's not something we wanted, but it's no longer safe for me to care for him at home alone. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. Madison has been with us almost constantly since Thursday, helping me sort through paperwork, making arrangements, trying to keep me from falling apart. She's barely slept, barely eaten. She's been carrying all of us. Why didn't she tell me? I could have helped. We could have been there for her. Because that's who my daughter is. She helps everyone else and asks for nothing. She convinced herself that you and Ben would be better off without her dragging you into our family crisis. that she was being selfish trying to have a relationship when she had so much going on. Lucas closed his eyes, understanding flooding through him. She pushed us away to protect us. She pushed you away because she's terrified of being abandoned again, like her ex-fiancé abandoned her. She thought if she pulled back first, it would hurt less when you inevitably left. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. But she's miserable, Lucas. I see her scrolling through photos of Ben on her phone. I hear her crying in the bathroom when she thinks I can't hear. She made a mistake out of fear, and now she doesn't know how to fix it. Why are you telling me this? Because my daughter deserves to be happy, and because that little boy deserves an explanation for why someone who cared about him disappeared. Eleanor's voice grew firm, but mostly because I've watched Madison choose everyone else's needs over her own for too long, and I'm done enabling it. She needs someone who will show her that asking for help isn't weakness, that letting people in isn't guaranteed heartbreak. Lucas was quiet, processing everything Eleanor had told him. Part of him wanted to be angry that Madison had made assumptions about how he'd react, that she'd cut them off without giving him a chance to prove her fears wrong. But mostly, he just felt sad. For Madison, carrying so much alone, and for Ben, hurt by someone who'd been acting out of misguided protection. Where is she now? Lucas asked. Lucas Thies. At the memory care facility with me, finishing up paperwork for her father's admission. We'll probably be here another few hours. Eleanor gave him the address. I'm not saying you should rush over here. I'm just saying that if you wanted to show my daughter what it looks like when someone doesn't run away when things get hard, well, you know where to find her. After they hung up, Lucas sat in his car in the warehouse parking lot, his half-eaten sandwich forgotten. He understood Madison's fear better now. She'd been abandoned when things got difficult before. Of course, she'd assume it would happen again. Of course, she'd try to protect herself and them by pulling away first. But understanding didn't erase the hurt she'd caused Ben. Didn't change the fact that his son had felt abandoned again, had started questioning whether people ever really stayed. Lucas had to think about Ben first, always. He picked up his phone and called Mrs. Chen. Any chance you could watch Ben for a few extra hours tonight? Something's come up, and I need to take care of it. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. Lucas finished his shift with purpose, driving his movements. He had a plan forming, a crazy idea that probably wouldn't work but felt right anyway. After clocking out, he stopped at the grocery store and picked up ingredients, then headed home to start cooking. Ben was surprised when Lucas picked him up from Mrs. Chen's house carrying grocery bags. What's all that? We're making dinner for someone who needs it, Lucas explained, and then we're going to deliver it. To Madison? Ben's voice was carefully neutral, guarding hope. To Madison and her mom. Madison's dad had to move to a special care home because his Alzheimer's got worse. Madison's been helping her mom deal with all of that, which is why she missed your presentation. She didn't want to, Ben. She had a family emergency. But Ben processed this information quietly. Is she okay? I don't think so, buddy. I think she's been trying to handle everything by herself and forgotten that people who care about her want to help. Like how you try to do everything yourself and forget that I want to help too? Lucas smiled despite himself. Yeah, exactly like that. So we're going to show her what it looks like when people show up for each other, even when things are hard. Are you okay with that? Ben thought about it seriously. Will she say she's sorry for missing my presentation? I think she will. And if she doesn't, you can tell her how it made you feel. But Ben, I need you to understand something. Madison is going through a really hard time right now. Her dad is sick in a way that won't get better, only worse. That's really scary and sad. So if we do this, we're choosing to be there for her, even though she might not have a lot of energy for us right now. Can you handle that? Will we be her family, like, for real, not just when it's easy? If she'll let us, yeah. That's what I'm hoping for. Ben nodded slowly. Then yes, I can handle it. Because that's what families do, right? They show up even when it's hard. Lucas pulled his son into a hug, grateful beyond words for this small person who understood so much about love and loss and choosing courage anyway. That's exactly what families do. They cooked together, making Madison's favorite homemade lasagna that she'd mentioned during one of their early dinners. Ben helped measure ingredients and stir sauce, chattering about what he wanted to say to Madison, revising his speech several times. Lucas let him process out loud, offering gentle guidance when needed. By 6 p.m., they were pulling into the parking lot of Riverside Memory Care, a single-story building with warm lighting and carefully maintained gardens. Lucas had texted Eleanor to let her know they were coming, but he hadn't told Madison. He wanted to see her face, wanted to gauge her reaction, wanted to know if there was still something worth fighting for. They found Eleanor in the family lounge, sitting on a couch looking exhausted but relieved. She stood when she saw them, tears immediately springing to her eyes. "You came," she said simply. "We brought dinner," Ben announced, holding up the casserole dish carefully. Dad made Madison's favorite. Eleanor smiled warmly at Ben. "You must be the young man I've heard so much about. Madison talks about you all the time, you know. She has photos of your ocean drawings on her phone." "She does?" Ben's face lit up with cautious hope. "She does. Come on, let me take you to her." They followed Eleanor through quiet hallways decorated with artwork and family photos, designed to feel homey rather than institutional. She stopped outside a room where Lucas could hear voices, a man's confused questioning and a woman's patient, gentle responses. "She's been saying goodbye to her father," Eleanor whispered. "He's having a good moment right now, actually remembers who she is. Those are getting rarer." Lucas's chest tightened. He'd been so focused on his own hurt, on Ben's disappointment, that he had lost sight of what Madison was actually going through. Watching your parent forget you, having to place them in care, knowing that every goodbye might be the last coherent one, that was agony on a level Lucas understood too well. Eleanor knocked gently on the doorframe. "Madison? You have visitors." Lucas heard Madison's sharp intake of breath, then silence. Eleanor pushed the door open wider, revealing a room designed to look like a comfortable bedroom rather than institutional care. Madison was standing beside the bed where a man in his late 50s sat looking alert but confused. She looked exactly as tired as Lucas had expected, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messily, shoulders tight with tension. But it was the expression on her face when she saw Lucas and Ben that broke his heart. Hope and fear and guilt all mixed together, tears immediately filling her eyes. "Lucas? Ben? What are you—" "We brought dinner," Ben said, stepping forward with the casserole dish held out like an offering. "Because Dad said that's what families do when someone is having a hard time. They show up with food." Madison's face crumpled, and she covered her mouth with her hand, clearly fighting to keep her composure. The man in the bed, Madison's father, looked between them with gentle confusion. "Madison, honey, are these friends of yours?" he asked. Madison took a shaky breath, wiping at her eyes. "Yeah, Dad. These are very good friends. This is Lucas and his son Ben." "Lucas?" the older man repeated, studying Lucas carefully. Then his face brightened with recognition. "The single father who makes you smile when you talk about him. The one with the boy who loves ocean life." "Dad remembers the important things," Madison said softly, looking at Lucas with so much emotion he could barely breathe. "Even when everything else gets confused, he remembers what makes me happy." Eleanor took the casserole dish from Ben gently. "Why don't I take this to the family lounge and get it warmed up? Ben, would you help me set the table?" Ben looked at his father for permission. Lucas nodded, and Ben followed Eleanor out, leaving Lucas and Madison alone with her father. "You're the police officer," Madison's father said to her, his voice filled with pride even through the confusion. "My daughter, the police officer. She helps people." "That's right, Dad. She's good at helping everyone else." He looked at Lucas seriously. "But sometimes she forgets she needs help too. You'll help her remember that?" "I will, sir," Lucas promised, his voice rough with emotion. Madison was crying openly now, not trying to hide it anymore. Her father reached out and patted her hand clumsily. "It's okay to need people, Madison girl. Your old man taught you to be strong, but strength isn't doing everything alone. Strength is knowing when to ask for help." The clarity in his words, coming through the fog of disease, was breathtaking. Madison nodded, unable to speak. Her father's attention drifted then, his eyes losing focus. "I'm tired now. Think I'll rest." "Okay, Dad. You rest." Madison helped him settle back against the pillows, adjusting his blankets with practiced care. She kissed his forehead gently. "I love you." "Love you too," he murmured, already drifting toward sleep. Madison stood there for a long moment, watching her father, before finally turning to face Lucas fully. They stood on opposite sides of the room, years of their own pain and fear and hope hanging between them. "I'm sorry," Madison said finally, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Lucas, for disappearing, for missing Ben's presentation, for pushing you away without explanation. I was wrong. I was scared and overwhelmed, and I handled everything in the worst possible way." Lucas crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. "Eleanor called me. She told me what happened last Thursday, about your dad's episode, about the decision to move him here. I should have called you myself. I should have explained, should have asked for help instead of shutting you out. But I just kept thinking about how much I was asking of you, taking on someone with this much family drama, someone who couldn't guarantee she'd always be available or present or—" "Stop," Lucas said gently. "Just stop, Madison. Do you remember what you told me in my kitchen? When you were crying about your dad and I told you I'd help you put the pieces back together? You said everyone has complications. I said we're both just people trying to do our best with hard situations. That's still true. Your dad getting worse doesn't change that. It just means the situation got harder, which means we need each other more, not less." "But I hurt Ben," Madison whispered. "I promised I'd be at his presentation and I wasn't there. I can see it in his face. He feels abandoned again." "He does. And that hurt is real, and you'll need to talk to him about it. But Ben is also in the family lounge right now, helping your mom set the table because he understands that people he cares about are going through something hard, and he wants to help. That's what I've been teaching him. That love means showing up even when it's difficult, even when you're scared, even when you don't know if it will work out." Madison looked up at him with those hazel eyes that had caught his attention on a rainy morning months ago. "I don't deserve you, either of you. That's not how love works, Madison. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing. And I'm choosing you, complications and all. The question is, are you willing to choose us back? Not just when things are good, but when they're hard. Can you let us be there for you instead of trying to protect us by pushing us away?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, and Lucas could see her wrestling with fears that ran deep, with patterns established long before he'd entered her life. Then she took a shaky breath and nodded. "I want to try. I'm terrified, but I want to try." Lucas pulled her into his arms, feeling her collapse against him with relief and exhaustion. She cried into his shoulder while he held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances that they weren't going anywhere, that it was okay to lean on people, that she didn't have to be strong all the time. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but she looked lighter somehow. Like she'd been carrying a weight for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. "I need to talk to Ben," she said. "Properly apologize, explain what happened." "He'd like that. But maybe after dinner? You look like you haven't eaten in days." "I haven't, really. Food hasn't been appealing." Lucas took her hand. "Then let's go eat lasagna with our family, because that's what we are, Madison. Family. Messy, complicated, imperfect family, but family nonetheless." They walked hand in hand to the family lounge, where Eleanor and Ben had set up a spread that looked almost festive despite the institutional surroundings. Ben looked up when it entered, his face carefully neutral, protecting himself from potential hurt. Madison crossed to him immediately and knelt down so they were eye level. "Ben, I owe you a huge apology. I promised I'd be at your presentation, and I wasn't there. That was wrong of me, and I'm so sorry I hurt you." "Your dad got sick," Ben said carefully. Dad explained. "He did. There was an emergency and I had to help my mom, but I should have texted your dad to let him know what was happening. I should have explained instead of just disappearing. That wasn't fair to you." "Were you going to come back?" Ben asked, the real question underneath all the others. "Yes, I was always going to come back. I just got scared and confused and forgot that sometimes the bravest thing is asking for help instead of trying to handle everything alone." Madison's eyes were shining with tears again. "Your dad reminded me of that. And so did you, by coming here tonight with dinner even though I hurt you. That took real courage." Ben considered this, then asked the question that mattered most to him. "Are you going to stay this time, even when things are hard?" Madison looked at Lucas, then back at Ben. "I'm going to try my best to stay. And when I get scared or overwhelmed, instead of pushing you away, I promise to talk to your dad about it, to ask for help when I need it. Does that sound fair?" "Yeah," Ben said slowly. "That sounds fair. But Madison?" "Yeah, Ben? Next time I have a presentation or something important, will you really come, even if other stuff is happening?" Madison pulled him into a hug. "Next time, I'll be in the front row, with bells on, whatever that means." Ben giggled despite himself, and Lucas felt the tension in his chest finally release. They were going to be okay. Not perfect, not without challenges, but okay. They ate dinner together in that family lounge, sharing stories and laughter despite the difficult circumstances. Eleanor told embarrassing stories about Madison as a child, which made Ben laugh until he snorted. Madison asked about Ben's presentation, and he recited parts of it from memory, complete with gestures. Lucas watched the three of them, 4, counting Eleanor, and felt something that had been broken inside him start to knit back together. This was family. Not the one he'd imagined when he'd married Sarah, but a new constellation formed from loss and hope and the courage to try again. Imperfect, complicated, real. When they left that night, Madison walked them to their car. Ben gave her a fierce hug, making her promise again that she'd see him soon, then climbed into the back seat to give the adults privacy. "Thank you for coming," Madison said softly, "for showing me what it looks like when people don't run away." "Thank you for letting us in," Lucas replied. He hesitated, then added, "This isn't going to be easy, Madison. Your dad's condition is going to get harder. There will be more crises, more difficult days. Are you sure you want to do this with us in the picture? We come with our own complications." "I've never been more sure of anything," Madison said. "I spent the last week miserable, missing you both, convinced I'd ruined the best thing that had happened to me in years. I'm done running away from good things because I'm afraid they won't last. Even if this is hard, even if there are more rough patches, I want to face them with you, with both of you." Lucas kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Madison was smiling, a real smile, not the careful mask she'd been wearing. "I'll call you tomorrow," Lucas promised. "We'll figure out a schedule, work out how to balance everything, together." "Together," Madison agreed. "I like the sound of that." As Lucas drove home with Ben chattering excitedly in the back seat about how Madison had promised to teach him about police work, he felt lighter than he had in days. The road ahead would still be difficult. Madison's father would continue to decline. There would be more emergencies, more difficult conversations, more moments of doubt. But they wouldn't face any of it alone. And that, Lucas was learning, made all the difference. The weeks that followed their reunion at the memory care facility didn't magically erase the challenges they faced, but they transformed how those challenges felt. Instead of bearing weight alone, Lucas and Madison learned the delicate dance of sharing burdens, of asking for help, of showing up for each other even when, especially when, it was hard. Madison started joining them for dinner 3 nights a week, working around her patrol schedule and her visits to her father. On the nights she couldn't make it, she'd text updates about her day, small moments that kept them connected even when physically apart. Lucas learned to read between the lines of her messages, to know when long shift meant "I need space to decompress," versus "I could really use a hug." Ben, for his part, seemed to blossom under the consistency. Madison kept her promise about his next presentation, showing up early and sitting in the front row with a bouquet of flowers that made Ben beam with pride. She started teaching him basic self-defense moves in the backyard on Saturday mornings, patient and encouraging as he practiced the blocks and stances. Lucas would watch from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, marveling at how naturally she fit into the rhythms of their life. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Madison's father had good days and bad days, and the bad days were increasingly frequent. There were times when Madison would show up at their door after visiting him, eyes red from crying, and Lucas would simply hold her while she fell apart. Ben learned to recognize those nights, would bring her a glass of water without being asked, then quietly excuse himself to his room to give the adults space. "He's growing up," Madison observed one evening after Ben had tactfully disappeared upstairs. She was curled against Lucas's side on the couch, exhausted from a particularly difficult visit where her father hadn't recognized her at all. "He's learning to read emotional situations better than most adults I know." "He's had to," Lucas said quietly. Loss does that. It either breaks you or it teaches you to be more attuned to other people's pain. Both of you have been through so much. Sometimes I feel guilty adding more weight to what you're already carrying. Lucas tilted her chin up so she was looking at him. We've had this conversation before. You're not a burden, Madison. You're family, and families share the weight. Even when the weight keeps getting heavier? Especially then. The truth of those words was tested 3 months after their reconciliation. Lucas got the call at work on a Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor, her voice shaking, explaining that Madison's father had taken a sudden turn. The memory care facility had called an ambulance. Madison was already at the hospital, had been there for hours, and Eleanor thought maybe Lucas should know. Lucas didn't hesitate. He called his boss, explained the situation, and left work immediately to pick up Ben from school. Mrs. Chen met them at the hospital with a care package of sandwiches and coffee, bless her soul, and took Ben to the waiting room while Lucas went to find Madison. He found her in a private consultation room with Eleanor and a doctor who was explaining something about pneumonia and weakened immune systems and choices that needed to be made. Madison looked shell-shocked, holding her mother's hand with white knuckles, trying to process information that was coming too fast and hitting too hard. Lucas slipped into the room quietly and took Madison's other hand. She startled at his touch, then looked up at him with such relief and gratitude that his heart ached. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." The doctor paused, looking at Lucas with professional courtesy. "I'm sorry, are you family?" "Yes," Madison said before Lucas could answer. "He is." The word settled around Lucas's shoulders like a mantle. Family. Not boyfriend, not partner, but family. The doctor nodded and continued his explanation, and Lucas listened carefully, asking the questions that Madison and Eleanor were too overwhelmed to think of, taking mental notes of options and timelines and what would happen next. Madison's father was stable but declining. They could pursue aggressive treatment, antibiotics, potential hospitalization, or they could focus on comfort care, keeping him pain-free while nature took its course. The doctor was gentle but clear. Given the advanced state of the Alzheimer's, aggressive treatment would likely only prolong suffering rather than lead to any meaningful recovery. "What would Dad want?" Madison asked her mother, her voice breaking. Eleanor's face was streaked with tears. "Your father was always clear about this. When he got his diagnosis, he made me promise that when the time came, we wouldn't let him suffer just to keep him alive a little longer. He wanted dignity, not machines and hospitals." "So we're saying goodbye," Madison said flatly, the words landing like stones. "We're making him comfortable," the doctor corrected gently. "We're honoring his wishes. He'll be transferred back to the memory care facility with hospice support. It could be days, could be a couple of weeks, but yes, we're entering the final stage." After the doctor left, the three of them sat in that small room, processing the impossible weight of choosing to let someone go. Lucas held Madison while she cried, while Eleanor cried, while they both tried to come to terms with a decision that was right and terrible at the same time. "I need to see him," Madison said finally, wiping her eyes. "I need to tell him, I don't know what, everything, nothing, I just need to be with him." "We'll come with you," Eleanor said. Madison looked at Lucas. "You don't have to. I want to, if you'll let me." They found Ben in the waiting room playing a quiet game on Mrs. Chen's phone. He looked up when they approached, reading the situation instantly in their faces. "Is Madison's dad going to die?" he asked with the blunt honesty of children. Madison knelt down to his level, her eyes still red but her voice steady. "Yes, Ben. Soon, probably. His body is very sick and we've decided not to make him keep fighting when it's too hard." "Like how Mom didn't have a choice, but Madison's dad does?" The question was more perceptive than Lucas expected. Madison nodded slowly. "Kind of like that. Your mom's death was sudden, unexpected. My dad's has been coming for a while, and he told us what he wanted when the time came, so we're honoring that. Can I say goodbye to him? I only met him once, but he was nice. He remembered the important things." Madison's eyes filled with tears again. "He did, didn't he? He'd like that, Ben. He'd like that a lot." They made an unlikely procession to the hospital room. Eleanor, Madison, Lucas, Ben, and Mrs. Chen, who'd insisted on coming along to support Eleanor. Madison's father was awake but groggy, the oxygen mask making his breathing sound mechanical and strange. His eyes flickered with brief recognition when he saw Madison and Eleanor. "My girls," he murmured, the words muffled but clear enough. "We're here, Dad," Madison said, taking his hand. "We're all here." His gaze traveled to Lucas, then to Ben, confusion mixing with curiosity. Madison followed his line of sight and smiled through her tears. "Dad, this is my family. Lucas and his son, Ben. They wanted to meet you properly." Ben stepped forward with the kind of courage that made Lucas's chest tight with pride. "Hi, Mr. Cole. I'm Ben. Your daughter is teaching me about police work and ocean conservation and how to be brave when things are scary." Something in Madison's father's expression cleared, became more present. "She's good at that. Being brave. Learned it from her old man. You were a police officer too, right?" Ben continued. "Madison said you ran into burning buildings and saved people." "Long time ago," the older man rasped. "Different kind of brave now. Letting go. That's brave too." The wisdom in those words, coming from someone whose mind was mostly fog, hit everyone in the room. Madison pressed her father's hand to her cheek, crying openly now. "I don't know how to let you go, Dad." "Yes, you do. You already know." His eyes found Lucas. "You take care of my girl? And her mom?" "I will, sir. You have my word." "Good man. Can see it." His attention drifted to Eleanor, and his face softened with love that transcended confusion. "Best thing I ever did. Marrying you. Best thing." Eleanor leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Best thing I ever did too, you stubborn man." They stayed for another hour, sharing memories, telling stories, filling the sterile hospital room with laughter and tears. Madison's father drifted in and out of clarity, but in his lucid moments, he was fully present, fully himself. He told Ben to take care of the oceans because somebody's got to. He made Lucas promise to never let Madison push him away when she got scared. He told Eleanor she'd been the love of his life, and he was sorry he had to leave her. "Don't be sorry," Eleanor said fiercely. "You gave me 40 years of the best kind of love. That's more than most people get in a lifetime." When they finally left, it was with the knowledge that they'd said everything that needed saying. The goodbyes weren't finished. There would be more visits, more moments. But the important words had been spoken. Madison's father passed away 6 days later, on a quiet Sunday morning with both Madison and Eleanor at his bedside. Lucas got the call from Eleanor just after sunrise. He woke Ben gently, explained what had happened, and they drove to the memory care facility together. They found Madison in her father's room, sitting beside his now empty bed, staring at nothing. She'd been crying, but now she just looked exhausted, wrung out, like she had nothing left. Lucas sat down beside her and took her hand. Ben climbed into her lap without asking permission, wrapping his arms around her neck in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry your dad died," Ben said simply. "It's really hard when that happens." Madison held on to Ben like he was an anchor, and Lucas watched as something in her expression shifted. Not from grief to happiness, that would take time, but from isolation to connection. She wasn't alone in this. She had people who understood, who'd walked this path before, who knew that sometimes there were no words that helped but presence meant everything. The funeral was 3 days later, on a rare, clear autumn day that felt like nature was offering a gift. The service was beautiful, full of stories about a man who'd served his community, loved his family fiercely, and faced his final battle with the same courage he'd shown throughout his life. Lucas stood beside Madison throughout, one hand resting on the small of her back, letting her know, without words, that he was there. Ben sat on her other side, periodically reaching over to squeeze her hand. Eleanor spoke about her husband with the kind of raw honesty that made everyone cry, but she also made them laugh with stories of his terrible jokes and his insistence on breakfast for dinner. "My husband lived his life in service to others," Eleanor said from the podium, her voice strong despite her tears. "As a police officer, as a father, as a husband. But he also understood something important, that asking for help isn't weakness, that letting people care for you is a gift you give them. I watched him fight this disease with everything he had, but I also watched him accept care with grace. That's the legacy I hope we all carry forward." Madison spoke too, her voice shaking but determined. She talked about learning courage from her father, about how he'd taught her to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. She also admitted, with raw vulnerability, that she'd learned some lessons the hard way, that sometimes the bravest thing was asking for support rather than trying to handle everything alone. My dad told me something in the hospital, Madison said, looking directly at Lucas and Ben. He said that letting go was its own kind of brave. I didn't understand it at first, but I think I do now. He was letting go of life, yes, but he was also letting go of the need to control everything, to protect everyone, to be strong all the time. He was letting the people who loved him take care of him. That's courage, too. After the service, there was a reception at Eleanor's home. People filled the house with food and condolences and stories. Lucas made sure Madison ate something, ran interference when well-meaning relatives got too overwhelming, and kept Ben entertained when the adult conversations got too heavy. It was late afternoon when they finally found a quiet moment alone on Eleanor's back porch. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. "Thank you," Madison said quietly, leaning against the porch railing, "for being here, for bringing Ben, for knowing exactly what I needed, even when I didn't know myself." "That's what family does," Lucas replied, coming to stand beside her. Madison turned to face him fully, her eyes serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About my dad. About what he said in the hospital. About what I want my life to look like going forward." Lucas felt his heart rate pick up, unsure where this was going. "Okay. My dad spent his whole life serving others, and that's beautiful, but he also made sure to build a life with my mom, to have love and partnership and someone to come home to." Madison took Lucas's hands. "I don't want to wake up in 20 years and realize I spent so much time being scared of getting hurt that I missed out on actually living." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you, Lucas Reed. I love your strength and your patience and the way you love your son. I love how you showed up for me even when I pushed you away. I love that you understand grief and healing and the messy, complicated work of moving forward." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I'm saying I want to build a life with you and Ben. Not someday, not eventually, but starting now. Intentionally. All in." Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I love you too. I've loved you since you handed me that warning on a rainy morning and saw me as a person instead of just another traffic violation. I love your courage and your compassion and the way you make Ben laugh. I love that you're willing to be vulnerable even when it terrifies you." "So what do we do now?" Madison asked, smiling through tears. "Now we figure out what our family looks like. We make plans. We combine our lives intentionally instead of just hoping it works out." Lucas pulled her closer. "We show Ben and your mom and anyone else who's watching that it's possible to love again after loss. That families can be built from broken pieces and still be strong." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while the autumn sun slanted through the trees. Inside, they could hear the murmur of conversation, Ben's laughter at something someone said, Eleanor's voice warm with gratitude as she thanked someone for coming. "My mom wants to downsize," Madison said eventually. "The house is too big for just her, too many memories. She's been talking about maybe finding an apartment, something smaller and easier to maintain." "That makes sense. Change can be good, especially after loss." "I was thinking," Madison hesitated, then pushed forward with characteristic courage. "What if we looked for a house together? Something big enough for all of us, you, me, Ben, and Mom, if she wants. Not right away, but maybe in a few months when we've all had time to adjust." Lucas pulled back to look at her face, making sure he'd heard correctly. "You want us to all live together?" "Is that crazy? It might be crazy. It's definitely fast, but Dad's death made me realize that life is short and unpredictable, and I don't want to waste time being cautious when I could be building something real." Madison searched his face anxiously. "Unless you think it's too soon, which would be completely reasonable," Lucas cut her off with a kiss, pouring everything he felt into it, love and hope and gratitude and joy. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "It's not too soon," Lucas said firmly. "It's exactly right. Ben would love it. And honestly, I think your mom and Mrs. Chen would become unstoppable if they lived in the same house." Madison laughed, the sound bright and genuine despite the grief of the day. "Oh no, you're right. We'd never have peace again. But we'd have family. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful family." They went back inside to find Ben showing Eleanor his latest ocean drawings while she oohed and ahed with genuine interest. Mrs. Chen was organizing leftovers with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Other guests were starting to leave, offering final condolences and hugs. Lucas caught Ben's eye across the room and beckoned him over. Ben excused himself politely and trotted over, looking between his dad and Madison with curious hope. "What's up?" Ben asked. "How would you feel about Madison moving in with us?" Lucas asked directly, knowing Ben deserved honesty. "Not right away, but maybe in a few months. We'd probably need to find a bigger house first." Ben's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Like for real permanently?" "For real permanently," Madison confirmed. "And maybe my mom too, if she wants. We'd all be under one roof, one family." "Can I have a bigger room with space for all my ocean stuff?" Lucas laughed. "I think that can be arranged." Ben threw his arms around both of them, squeezing tight. "This is the best day ever. I mean, I'm sad about Mr. Cole dying. That part is really sad. But this part is really good. Can both things be true?" "Both things can absolutely be true," Madison said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your dad taught you that, and it's one of the most important lessons there is." The next few months were a whirlwind of change and healing. Eleanor decided she did want to live with them, admitting that the thought of being alone in an empty house was more than she could bear. They started house hunting together, all 5 of them: Lucas, Madison, Ben, Eleanor, and even Mrs. Chen, who appointed herself their official advisor. They found it in early December, a sprawling 4-bedroom house on the edge of town with a backyard big enough for Ben's dreams and a kitchen that made Eleanor gasp with delight. It needed work. The paint was outdated, the floors needed refinishing, the garden was overgrown, but it had good bones and even better potential. "We could make this home," Madison said, standing in the empty living room and envisioning furniture and laughter and life. "We could make this perfect," Lucas agreed. They closed on the house in January, exactly 1 year after that rainy morning traffic stop that had started everything. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. Ben declared it fate. Eleanor called it a blessing. Mrs. Chen said it was about time and started planning a housewarming party. Moving day was chaos, boxes everywhere, furniture that didn't quite fit where they'd planned, moments of frustration mixed with giddy excitement. Ben claimed the biggest bedroom and immediately started covering the walls with ocean posters. Eleanor set up her room with photos of her late husband, creating a shrine to memory that honored the past while embracing the future. Madison and Lucas took the master bedroom, and the first night in their new house, they lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of their combined family settling in around them. "Are you happy?" Madison asked, curled against Lucas's side. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," Lucas admitted. "There were days, right after Sarah died, when I couldn't imagine feeling anything but grief. And now look at us. Do you think she'd approve? Of me? Of this family we're building?" Lucas had thought about this question a lot over the past months. He'd even talked to Ben about it, wanting to make sure his son was comfortable with how they were honoring Sarah's memory while moving forward. "I think Sarah would love you," Lucas said honestly. "She'd love how you treat Ben, how you make him laugh, how you've helped him understand that it's okay to love again without forgetting the people we've lost. And I think she'd be happy that I'm happy, that we're happy." "I dream about my dad sometimes," Madison confessed. "He's always himself in the dreams, before the Alzheimer's, when he was strong and sharp and knew exactly who I was. He tells me I'm doing good, that he's proud of me. I'm sure he is. He told you to be brave, and look at you, buying a house, building a blended family, choosing love even when it's scary. We're quite a pair, aren't it? 2 people who've lost so much, trying to build something new." "We're exactly the right pair," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "We understand what the other has been through. We know that grief doesn't just disappear, that there will be hard days mixed in with the good ones. But we also know that it's worth it, the risk, the vulnerability, the opening yourself up to potential loss. Because the alternative is being alone, and we're both done with alone." They fell asleep in their new house, in their new bedroom, surrounded by boxes that still needed unpacking and plans that still needed finalizing. But they fell asleep together, and that made all the difference. The housewarming party Mrs. Chen had insisted on planning happened 2 weeks later. She'd invited what felt like half the town: neighbors, coworkers, friends from Ben's school, fellow officers from Madison's precinct. The house was packed with people and noise and laughter. Lucas stood in the kitchen, watching the controlled chaos, marveling at how full their lives had become. Ben was showing a group of kids his bedroom. Madison was deep in conversation with some police buddies about a case she'd worked. Eleanor was teaching Mrs. Chen's granddaughter how to frost cookies. Tyler's dad, the one Ben had mentioned months ago who'd gone through his own relationship struggles, came over and clinked his beer bottle against Lucas's. "You did good, man," he said, gesturing around the packed house. "Built yourself a real family here." "Thanks. It's been a journey." "The good things usually are." He took a swig of beer. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Sure." "Don't take it for granted. The happiness, the family, the second chances. I know you won't mean to, but life gets busy and it's easy to forget how lucky we are. So every now and then just stop and appreciate it, you know?" Lucas looked around the room again, really seeing it. Ben's laughter floating down from upstairs. Madison's hand gestures as she told a story, animated and alive. Eleanor's gentle smile as she watched her daughter thrive. Their home, filled with people who cared about them, who'd shown up to celebrate this new beginning. "Yeah," Lucas said quietly. "I know exactly what you mean." The party wound down eventually, guests trickling out with promises to get together soon, leaving behind a house that was messy but warm with the evidence of community. They cleaned up together. Lucas on dishes, Madison on trash duty, Eleanor wiping down surfaces, Ben supposedly helping but mostly getting in the way. "Can we do this every weekend?" Ben asked, sneaking a leftover cookie. "Absolutely not," Lucas said firmly. "Once was exhausting enough." "But it was fun, right?" Madison ruffled his hair. "It was perfect, just like this family." After Ben was in bed and Eleanor had retired to her room, Lucas and Madison found themselves back in the living room, collapsed on the couch in exhausted contentment. "We should probably talk about the future," Madison said, playing with Lucas's fingers. "Make some actual plans instead of just stumbling forward." "What kind of plans?" "Well, we're living together, raising a kid together, taking care of my mom together. We're basically married in every way except legally." She paused, then added with studied casualness, "Which we could fix if you wanted." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "Madison Cole, are you proposing to me?" "I'm suggesting it's something we should discuss. We don't have to rush into anything, but I also don't see the point in waiting years when we already know this is what we want." Lucas sat up, turning to face her fully. "You're right, we do know what we want. So let's do this properly." He stood up and walked to his jacket, still hanging by the door from the party. From the pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Madison's eyes went wide. "You had a ring? This whole time?" "I bought it last month," Lucas admitted, coming back to kneel in front of her. "I was waiting for the right moment, but apparently you beat me to the proposal." "Lucas Reed, you impossible romantic. Madison Cole, you showed up in my life on the worst morning, pulled me over for speeding, and somehow saw past the exhausted single dad to the person underneath. You made me believe I could be happy again. You made Ben laugh again. You showed us what it means to choose love even when it's scary, to ask for help instead of carrying everything alone, to build family from broken pieces." Lucas opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Madison was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." Lucas slipped the ring on her finger, and Madison pulled him up onto the couch, kissing him with all the joy and hope and love she'd been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Madison examined the ring in wonder. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This whole crazy, beautiful family is perfect." "We're pretty far from perfect," Lucas corrected gently. "But we're real, and we're ours." They told Ben the next morning over breakfast. His reaction was appropriately dramatic, cheering, doing a victory dance around the kitchen, demanding to know if he could be the ring bearer even though they hadn't planned the wedding yet. "Can I call Madison Mom?" Ben asked suddenly, the question coming out shy and hopeful. Madison's eyes filled with tears immediately. Only if you want to, Ben. I would never want to replace your mom or make you feel like you have to. I want to, Ben interrupted. I'll always remember my first mom. But you're my mom too now. Can't someone have two moms if one of them is in heaven? Yes, Lucas said, his voice rough with emotion. Someone can absolutely have two moms, one who loved you first and one who chose to love you now. Madison pulled Ben into a fierce hug. I'd be honored to be your mom, Ben. So incredibly honored. Eleanor came downstairs to find all three of them crying and laughing in the kitchen, Ben explaining the proposal through excited gestures. She added her own tears and hugs to the mix, declaring this the best family she could have hoped to become part of. They planned the wedding for spring, wanting something small and meaningful rather than a big production. Just close friends and family, a simple ceremony that honored both the past and the future. The night before the wedding, Lucas found himself in Ben's room for their usual bedtime routine. But instead of a story, Ben wanted to talk. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Ben asked. A little, Lucas admitted. But it's good nervous, excited nervous. I'm glad you found Madison. I'm glad she found us. Ben paused, then added carefully, do you think Mom knows about the wedding and the new family and everything? Lucas had been expecting this question, had been preparing for it. I think if there's any part of Mom still watching over us, she knows. And I think she's happy for us. She never wanted us to be sad forever. I still miss her sometimes. Is that okay? It's more than okay, buddy. It's healthy. Madison misses her dad too. We all carry the people we've lost with us, and that's how it should be. Tomorrow isn't about forgetting anyone. It's about choosing to keep living, keep loving, keep building a life that honors everyone who helped make us who we are. That's really smart, Dad. Lucas smiled and kissed Ben's forehead. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Dad, I love you, and I love Madison, and I love our weird, perfect family. I love you too, Ben. More than you'll ever know. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of spring day that felt like nature's blessing. The ceremony was in the backyard of their new home, decorations simple but lovely, chairs set up in neat rows for their small gathering of loved ones. Madison walked down the makeshift aisle on Eleanor's arm, stunning in a simple white dress, her eyes finding Lucas's immediately. Ben stood beside Lucas in a tiny suit, holding the rings with solemn responsibility. The officiant spoke about love and loss and second chances, about building family from courage and choice. Lucas and Madison exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to show up for each other even when it was hard, to ask for help instead of carrying everything alone, to honor the past while embracing the future. I promise to be there for the hard days and the good ones, Madison said, her voice strong despite her tears. I promise to love Ben as my own son, to support your dreams, to remind you that asking for help isn't weakness. I choose you, Lucas Reed, every day, in every way. I promise to catch you when you fall and celebrate you when you rise, Lucas replied. I promise to be a partner in every sense, to share the weight and double the joy. I choose you, Madison Cole, with all my complications and all my heart. When the officiant pronounced them married, Ben cheered loudly enough to make everyone laugh. Lucas kissed his wife, while their small gathering applauded and Eleanor cried happy tears, and Mrs. Chen took approximately 1,000 photos. The reception was in their backyard, casual and perfect. There was music and dancing and toasts that were funny and touching. Tyler's dad gave a speech about second chances that made half the guests cry. Eleanor talked about how her late husband would have loved Lucas and Ben, how grateful she was to have found family again when she'd thought she'd be alone. Ben gave his own toast, written with Lucas's help, but delivered with pure 7-year-old sincerity. Today my dad married my mom, which is cool because I get to have a mom again. Not the same mom, but a really good one who teaches me about being brave and catching fish and staying even when things are hard. Our family used to be small and sad, but now it's bigger and happy. I'm glad Dad didn't give up on love, and I'm really glad Madison didn't either. Also, the cake is really good. As the sun set and the party continued, Lucas found a quiet moment with Madison. They stood at the edge of the yard, watching their family and friends celebrate, watching Ben dance with Eleanor, watching the life they'd built together unfold in real time. "We did it," Madison said softly. "Built something real from all the broken pieces." "We did," Lucas agreed, "and we're going to keep doing it. Every day, choosing each other, choosing this family, choosing courage over fear." "I love you, Lucas Reed." "I love you too, Madison Reed." They stood there as the evening deepened into night, as stars began appearing overhead, as their wedding day transformed into their first day of officially being married. Around them, the people they loved most celebrated and laughed and made memories that would last a lifetime. Years later, when people asked Lucas about his journey from that rainy morning traffic stop to this beautiful life, he would tell them the truth, that love after loss was terrifying and brave and worth every moment of fear, that building family from broken pieces created something stronger than what came before, that showing up, even when it was hard, was the most important choice you could make. He would tell them about a police officer who saw past his exhaustion to the person underneath, about a son who taught him that both things could be true, that you could miss what you lost and still embrace what you found, about a mother-in-law who became family not through blood but through choice, about community that showed up when you needed it most. But mostly, he would tell them that the wedding ring on his finger, different from the one he'd worn for 3 years after Sarah's death, represented not forgetting, but honoring. Not moving on, but moving forward. Not replacing love, but making room for more of it. Life was short and unpredictable. Hard things happened without warning, but beautiful things could grow from tragedy if you had the courage to let them. Lucas had learned that lesson on a rain-soaked morning when he'd been pulled over for speeding, desperate to get his sick son to the doctor, wearing a wedding ring that represented his past. Now he wore a ring that represented his future, married to a woman who understood that strength meant asking for help, raising a son who knew that loving again didn't mean forgetting, living in a house filled with family built from choice and courage. The ring on Madison's finger caught the lamplight as she reached for Ben, who'd come running over to show them something important. Lucas wrapped his arm around his wife, pulled his son close, and felt gratitude so profound it took his breath away. This was what happiness looked like after loss. Not forgetting, but finding. Not replacing, but expanding. Not just surviving, but truly living. And it had all started with a speeding ticket, a moment of inappropriate honesty, and the courage to believe that second chances were real.